Chapter 6. Responsibility for one's actions. Lilith woke with a crick in her neck. Opening her smoky emerald eyes, she found herself still hidden behind a tree, ignored by the day's chaos. Bleary-eyed, she stood up to find herself face to face with Kramer. She fell back to the ground in surprise. "You son of a bitch! Can you not be creepy?" Kramer acting the fool, spinning around in a full circle and scattering drops of blood from a severed head he was carrying. "Dance with me, my dear Lilith," he said merrily. "Let us go off and have a fabulous time." He reached down, offering her a hand. Lilith, disgusted, pulled herself up, pushing his hand away before dusting herself off. She wore typical manipulator armor, a lightweight chest plate with fur lining at the neck, leather pants with a fox head buckle, and light-plated boots. Her long, raven-colored hair fell to her shoulders. She smelled of sunflowers and lavender. Surprised at a flower being somewhere it shouldn't, she seized Kramer's hand and bent it backward, causing a wince of pain and a look of pleasure to flash across the man's face. "I like where this is going," he said, "but I don't know what I did to deserve such attention." She gripped him harder. "I told you before, never touch me, you creep!" With concentrated gravitational energy, she forced him down to his knees. "You put this flower in my hair." Furious, she intensified the gravity anomaly around him. Lewis arrived just seconds before she crushed him. "He's enjoying that a little too much," Kramer, mad at the interruption, told Lewis to scram. "Even if you're enjoying yourself, we need to assess the situation." He didn't say as much, but I think Tyrene is worried about the second army, the one the rookie was assigned to. Kramer scoffed. "That imbecile is worm food." Lilith kicked Kramer in the face and forced his head under her boot. "He'd better not be," she said. "You were supposed to be leading the southern attack." "Where were you?" "I was watching the slaughter and mayhem from the woods." Lewis noticed the head. "And you killed a messenger?" He grabbed the head from Kramer and tossed it away. Before it could stop tumbling, it was crushed under a hoof. Lieutenant Rama stopped with armored cavalry reinforcements. He leaped down from his horse and smashed Kramer in the face. "What happened here, Lilith?" Kramer climbed to his feet. "Why did you hit me?" he asked. His cold eyes met Rama's. "I received a report that you were twirling a human head. You killed one of our own. I don't have the time to discipline you now, but when this is over, your ass is mine." "Kinky," Kramer said with a flat smile. Rama shook his head in disgust and turned toward the other two. Lewis, standing up tall, answered for both of them. "We're here to investigate and save as many surviving soldiers as possible. We were instructed to have them rejoin the fighting at one of the other gates." "Let's get a head count," Rama ordered. Screams from the direction of the city preceded a herd of scared soldiers running out of the fog. A junior officer came forward as they reached the group, stopping the stampede. "Is Lord Forenza still alive?" Rama asked. "He's at the western gate, sir." Lewis spoke up. Lilith stared at Kramer. His relaxed attitude triggered her anger. She used just enough gravity magic to force him back to his knees. "At least we haven't lost him yet," Rama said. "Let's move through this fog and see what's going on." Lilith spoke up abruptly. "I was ordered to manipulate the barrier if we ran into enemy attachments. I placed the elemental wall around the city, trapping most of the Lestragonians' force inside. From the look of the fields, the southern army was destroyed." Rama nodded. "We still need to move up and deal with whatever's left." As if nothing had happened, Kramer was up and out from underneath Lilith's spell, dusting himself off and whistling. "What a freak," Lewis said, leading Lilith into the fog. The sounds of swords and armor clashing came from ahead. Rama led his forces forward with care, nervous that they'd met no Lestragonians so far. As they approached the city, they found giant body parts scattered along the riverbank leading to the southern bridge. Lilith cleared the fog with little effort, and Rama raised his eyes in shock at the scene before him and stopped his army. Slaughtered Lestragonians lay everywhere, alone and in lines, cut in half or dismembered. They moved forward. As they grew closer to the firewall, they heard the screams of a man. The shouts shook the air and the voice crackled, sounding primal, bestial, and unforgiving. Lewis stepped up in front of his commanding officer, snatched Kramer up like a puppy, and tossed him forward. "Test the waters," Kramer flipped the warrior off. Moving forward and clearing his way to the bridge, he found 4 blocks of the barrier missing. The wide-open zone made him take a step back nervously. "What the hell?" Kramer said to himself. "What the fuck happened here?" He pressed forward, following the trail of bodies deep into the broken city, and finally entering an open space in the center. They all showed signs of having been carved apart with a sharp edge. Curiosity and his own brutal nature drove him onward. More giant arms and torsos littered the ground all about. The slithery man found a vantage point and climbed up to take in a better view. His jaw dropped at seeing Rayleigh holding a blade in the center of a storm of blood. The last human still standing, the soldier was pushing forward, engaged with the remaining Lestrygonians and their leader, Hirian. Seemingly uncontrolled, he was savagely cutting down any fleeing soldiers who came near. Kramer stalked through the shadows, watching as the man he'd ridiculed drove a wedge into the enemies before him. In one moment, Rayleigh turned his head. His eyes found Kramer atop a building. Kramer stood still as a sliver of fear overcame him. Then his instincts kicked in, and he retreated to a safe distance before lighting a flare and waiting for Lewis and Lilith to make their way into him. With lightning speed, Rayleigh covered the length of the square, clashing with one giant after another. Hirian's decision whether to retreat or continue fighting took only a matter of seconds. The will not to lose won over. His pride and anger suppressed his fear as he faced Rayleigh. Deflecting a blow, Rayleigh shifted his weight, grabbed the axe's shaft, and kicked the giant, causing him to let go of his weapon and fall back several feet. Throwing the axe to the ground, Rayleigh moved lightly, quickening his pace. The Veil's raw energy had overtaken him, and now responded to his will. Taking advantage of the opening he had created, Rayleigh moved closer, striking Hirian with a jab and a hook to the body, causing the giant to wince in pain. In seconds, he had pushed Hirian's head to the ground. Lewis and Lilith found Kramer, and at his shocked expression they turned to study the battlefield in silence. Lewis watched Rayleigh's actions, surprised and impressed. At the moment, Rayleigh stood suddenly surrounded. The foul air moved about the square, Rayleigh's body releasing a low current that infected the wind with a virulent energy and changed its course, turning it into a convulsing tempest force that built in intensity. Then the wind exploded, driving gales of vile energy into the adjacent streets. In the blink of an eye, the Lestrygonian soldiers' flesh melted off them. Rotting skin fell from their bones, splashing onto the ground as every ounce of their bodies was turned inside out. A constant pulse of energy flowed from Rayleigh's body, this power not hot but cold, and corrupting. The magic flared outward, peeling the skin off of any organic matter in the area. Lilith watched the encounter carefully, and used gravity and air currents to pull Lewis back to safety, then created another barrier around the square. Smaller but more concentrated, this wall spared the Forenza army from the necromantic energy. "He's dangerous right now, Lewis," Lilith said. "And for some reason, my magic is weak. The power radiating from him is rotting everything it touches. I've heard rumors of liches having this kind of power, but I've never seen anything like it." Looking at Kramer's expressionless face, she added, "This type of magic only exists in the Veil. Does he come from there? Is he the god of blood and death?" Smiling ludicrously, Kramer kept his eyes on the fight. "That's death magic." He lost his cocky smile and took on a serious tone. "Who would have guessed a rookie would have that power within him? It's a rare gift. I know of no one born of our realm who can do what he's doing. But on top of that, his physical abilities are on a par with the giants. Is he a member of the Pantheon?" Lilith couldn't pull her eyes away either. Forcing them to shut, she turned and faced Kramer. "There's no way in hell. Those beings sit on their thrones and believe themselves to be gods." Kramer listened carefully, and then pointed toward Rayleigh. "Then explain him to me." Bending low, he moved closer to the edge to study the action. Lewis stood still, listening to the exchange but focused on Rayleigh's unrefined movements. A thought came to him and he spoke out loud, catching both of their attention. "He's causing all this havoc with no battle techniques. Watch his movements. Everything he does leaves huge holes in his defense. It's a brute tactic. It works because he's fighting marauding giants. If he faced someone like Kramer, With his tricks and games, he wouldn't do nearly so well. Lilith focused her senses on Rayleigh in an attempt to read him. Her face grew flushed. His energy is chaotic and intoxicating, she said. How could he be so strong? Kramer asked enthusiastically. Oh, he's an Ashura. Yes, he must be. It makes sense now. He's an enemy of the gods, a creature of war and strife. But there aren't many Ashuras left. They all fought themselves to death. So who is he? A light bulb clicked on in Kramer's head, and his eyes widened. They don't even know what they have, those idiots. He sat back and laughed. The outburst caught the attention of some straggling Lestrygonians. Lilith and Lewis ducked down as Kramer sat where he was, not caring about the rage-filled eyes keying in on him. Tossing 2 daggers toward the giants, Kramer used his abilities to manipulate the blades and cut down the onlookers. Rama arrived at the square and, reading the situation, remained calm and kept his army at a distance as he searched for an explanation. He called out for Lewis and Lilith. Grabbing Kramer, the two headed down. Kramer insolently fired off a quick verbal jab intended for Rama's ears. I hope you have a return address for wherever you and Tyrene got this guy. Ignoring him, Rama continued to watch the fighting in the square. As long as that death aura is active, we can't get close without taking serious damage, he said loud enough for his officers to hear. I need a messenger. A man in black leather stepped forward from the crowd. Rama's hands moved worriedly as he wrote a note on a piece of parchment. Lilith stared at him. Have you seen anything like this before? We're going to need Walker to help if Rayleigh's fight goes on. At the moment, we're powerless. Head west and give this to Walker Forenza. Rama told the messenger. Hurry, he said, tempering his tone but raising his voice as he sent the courier off. Lilith stood tall, focused on manipulating the elements and particles in the air. The electromagnetic pulses from Rayleigh were still disrupting her ability to gather energy and redirect it. The field he was producing extended to the northwestern and eastern city blocks, causing the wall of elements to dissipate and returning the energy to the atmosphere. We need to find a way to get into the fight, Lewis said, looking at Lilith and Kramer. Concerned for self-preservation, Kramer reached for the dice in his pocket, rolling them in his hand and then checking them. A 3, a 1, and a 6. He calculated his next move. Kramer's methods were odd even to those who thought they knew him. But his ruthless mind had one crutch, and that was his superstitions. Like a giant snake, Kramer slithered away, circling the edge of the battlefield, picking off stragglers, and taking their heads. His erratic movement put him in a position to attack those he was hunting without being seen. Eventually, he worked his way back to where Lewis and Lilith were. He pulled out a vial of green liquid and poured some into each of the heads he'd collected. As the blood curdled, he hurled the charged skulls into the remaining groups of Lestrygonian soldiers. The heads exploded into fire mid-flight, sending poison-tipped skull fragments into the flesh of the giants, contaminating their bodies and spreading a poisonous fog that incapacitated others. Hirian used his affinity with earth to alter the ground around him, encapsulating himself and several soldiers in protection from the poisonous wind. As they sweated from the heat, nervousness grew among his soldiers. Letting the poison linger, Kramer made his way toward the group with his abnormal movements. Lewis found an opening and entered the battle with his weapon drawn, a twin-bladed spear. Charging into their blind spot from a back alley, he attacked with precise chopping motions, tearing through flesh. A tired giant made a wild attack at Kramer's neck. Without breaking stride, Kramer smiled and slid around the giant, cutting its throat and ripping its head off, then kicking the oversized skull to the ground. As he licked the blood off his face, a sense of fear came over the giants. He cut them down enthusiastically, slicing their necks one by one, dancing about the battlefield and laughing in the fountains of giant blood. Juggling his twin serrated and curved Damascus blades, Kramer put on a spectacle for the Forenza army. He wiggled his fingers, activating his power using giant's blood to heal Lilith and restore her mana, then stuck his tongue out at Lewis. Rama held his army back, waiting for the right moment, while allowing the 3 specialists to do as they pleased in the square. Worried about Lestrygonian reinforcements, he looked around hoping to predict where giants might appear. First Sergeant! Rama yelled, a scruffy, brown-haired man with a chipped tooth rode forward. His bronze armor was sturdy, but the dull polish made it clear that he was not highborn. "Your orders, sir? Take 200 men and reinforce the western flank. Are you expecting something, sir?" "I am." "Keep your wits about you, Riley, and watch the mountainside. There may be more giants in the forest to the north." The sergeant nodded and returned to his company. His dark eyes were firm as he addressed them. "My friends, we've been assigned to bolster the western attacking force and guard their blind side against threats from the mountain." "First Sergeant, sir, the commander is sending just us for this task?" one of his men asked. "Yes." Riley saw the fear in the man's eyes. "Steady yourself. If you have an ounce of fear, these monsters will use it against you. Steel your hearts, men. Today we earn our pay." He raised his hand, leading his men apart from the army and west towards Walker's detachment. Circling the city to avoid the battle, Riley caught glimpses of Rayleigh, Lilith, and Lewis fighting it out in the square. Pushing away the wish that he could manipulate elements, he focused on the task in front of him. "Will they be of any use, sir?" Rama's first lieutenant asked. "Even if they're only a buffer in between Lord Firenze and the unknown in the forest. All I can ask is that they fight to the best of their ability. They're just commoners, sir. It's not like they're elites. Look into the square, Lieutenant. Those three are just mercenaries, and look what they're doing. Sir, I would say that those three are abnormal no matter what their upbringing. But Sergeant Riley's men really are just commoners. This is a war. We're equals on the battlefield. Maybe you forgot that?" Rama continued to watch the battle unfold in the square. "We will win or lose by our ability to not only survive, but win each and every fight from here on out." Turning his head, Rama took a look at the rest of his men. "Pass the order to fan out and prepare for battle. When the moment comes, we must seize it and lead the Firenze clan to victory." First Sergeant Riley hurried his men through the city toward the western gate. A queasy feeling sat in his stomach. "This is my first command. I must not allow my men to perish without completing our task." He pushed the sour sentiment down. His light brown hair showed some natural gray, a badge of honor Riley had earned working the mines and surveying in stressful environments. Keeping his cool, he gave out orders for deployment. The screams of rampaging giants brought chills down their spines. "Stay focused on the enemy before us. Our job is to support the troops at the west gate. Let's show these monsters that they should fear the common folk of the Firenze." Rallying to the voice of their sergeant, his troops gritted their teeth and closed in on the enemy. Shots from their rifles pierced giant flesh, slowing the horde's momentum. Anxiety infected the horses, causing them to jump up, kicking and jolting. The soldiers in the front line did their best to pull the animals down before the next round of rifle fire. Riley lay across his horse's side and fired a well-timed slug, piercing the skull of a giant and dropping the creature with a thump. Chapter 7. Growing Pains. Rayleigh ignored his environment. He felt like he was going to explode from the pain of torn muscles and ligaments. Focusing his senses on Hirian, he did his best to block the sensations filling his head. He forced his right foot forward, toward Hirian. Hirian, though exhausted, did not want to let Rayleigh gain an advantage. He moved to meet him. The speed of both combatants increased. Rayleigh grinding his teeth as he charged, pushing his limits. He kicked, flinging mud to cloud Hirian's vision. Then dashing to the right, he vanished from Hirian's sight and slipped behind the giant. Rayleigh threw a punch with all his strength, causing a kinetic explosion that blew away corpses and connecting with Hirian's ribs. The surrounding buildings amplified the sound, echoing it through the city. Rayleigh continued to push past his physical limits, his muscles tearing with every movement. His mind went blank from the pain, and he fell deeper into bloodlust, giving in more and more to the veil. Hirian, instinctively dodging most of the attacks thrown his way, avoided significant damage. Swinging his double-bladed axe wildly and trying to keep his ground, he used his raw strength to overpower Rayleigh and push him back, creating a bit of space to catch his breath. With every step, incredible pain rushed into his head. Watching from the sky, Rayleigh's raven circled the battlefield. Its cries mocked the action as it flapped up to a higher viewpoint. With every swing of the heavy sword, the muscles in Rayleigh's arms tore. His entire body throbbed and ached. His internal organs had taken severe damage, draining his stamina and forcing him to a stop. The pressure he'd put on his body was causing blood to leak from his nose and mouth, but the microorganisms continued to work, stitching his muscles back together, repairing the wear and tear on his organs, and creating a light field of electricity around his body. The field intensified, becoming visible even to the naked eye, as the machines worked to save the body they made their home. Each muscle thread recovered, improved, growing more robust and letting Rayleigh regain mobility. Willing himself through the pain, he continued to test his physical abilities. He was almost unceasingly slipping in and out of consciousness, and his eyesight started failing, causing him to lose track of Hirian. He awakened more of his dormant gifts, unable to control his body evolution and the energy it drew from the veil. The power grew in density, collapsing on itself, creating a vacuum and drawing in the natural energy of his surroundings. Something awoke from the darkness within him and reached out in hunger to the dead soldiers, absorbing them, turning them into more energy. Enormous amounts of power that couldn't be absorbed by the broken bodies transformed into a cloud of blood, a fog of pure death that spread through the square. The dense energy hung there, suspended, waiting to be metabolized. Rayleigh's fatigue dissipated, but his body was already at its limits. The power he'd absorbed began to leak out. Aspects of his newfound abilities spread in all directions, attacking everything in their path. Allies and enemies alike created as much distance from him as they could. Rayleigh's powers continued to make it difficult for Rama to send in soldiers. Lilith marked the battleground with her eyes, tracking the electricity surging through the air. She knelt behind a wall, opened her senses, and focused on Rayleigh, tracking his heartbeat. She heard a screech from above. "Don't interfere!" A raven landed in front of her. "You will not interfere!" The bird had grown remarkably after being enveloped in the veil energy. It also exuded shadowy energy similar to Rayleigh's. Lilith stepped back to look at the animal. Unable to completely cut herself off from Rayleigh, she matched her movements to the rhythm of his pulse and found she could predict the energy bursts erupting from Rayleigh's body. Closing her eyes, she focused on the power pulsing out of his body. The machines in his bloodstream were the cause of the vibrations. They were amplifying the natural electrical currents, stimulating all the power in Rayleigh's body as if it was a battery and sending it erupting outwards. The electromagnetic waves then affected the organic machines in others' bodies. Burning embers sparked in Rayleigh's soul and exploded outward from the pit of his stomach. The energy spread like wildfire, filling his body and awakening his natural power. Intense heat flared up and then condensed on itself, covering his body and causing the veil's vacuum of raw energy to collapse. He looked like he was covered in fire. The raw power lit up like a beacon, drawing the attention of everyone in the city. Fighting stopped, as his radiation grew, consuming all the energy around him. It pushed outward, seeming sentient as it searched for more substances to feed on and grow. The flames erupted again, even hotter, and turned on Rayleigh himself, burning the skin from his body. Plowing into the town square, 50 men followed Berlin and converging on the panicked giants. Yoshi pushed ahead, cutting down the tree-like figures with nimble strikes. Explosions and aftershocks reverberated through the ground, but they pushed forward, smashing and trampling the ground like wild horses, carving a path toward Tyrene. The remaining forces were preparing to enter the town square. Lewis dashed about with his spear, covering a wide area. In one motion, he scanned his surroundings. Tossing his spear into the sky, he teleported himself to it in an instant. He paused long enough to take in a bird's-eye view of the town. Berlin and Yoshi were visible clearing a path toward Tyrene and the Band of the Wolf, but he saw no signs of large battles. Birds were gathering above the western gate. Crows with full bellies mocked those on the battlefield as they fed. Crimson and blue mist flowing through the streets, as if it was alive. Walker Forenza walked out of the blood mist, clearing it behind him. A full army followed him toward the square where Rayleigh was engaged with Hirian. Walker's blood-red pupils never broke away from Rayleigh, following his every movement as he got faster and faster. The shock wave of each blow reverberated through the square. Walker waited, ready to finish Hirian if Rayleigh was taken down. From the corner of his eye, he saw a messenger arrive with a parchment sealed with Lewis's crest. Looking to the sky, walkers saw Lewis floating above. Then in a flash of lightning, Lewis dove from the sky, twirling his lance above his head, aiming for the space between Hirian and Rayleigh. He crashed down, thrusting his spear into the street, and causing the earth beneath the three of them to rise upwards. Using the momentum of his fall, he pole-vaulted over Hirian, twisted in the air, and slashed down, cutting a great gash into the giant's back and drawing Hirian's attention. Hirian closed his eyes and raised his arms to block the next overhead attack. Then sliding a hand up the spear's shaft, he grabbed it and threw Lewis toward Rayleigh, just missing the other man, who stood in a ready position catching his breath. Staring from the sidelines, Lilith saw Lewis being knocked into the air and away from the battle. She reached out, trying to create a barrier of wind to cushion his momentum, but he was thrown with too much force. She only slowed him enough to prevent fatal injuries. As one of her last surviving comrades hit the ground and ragdolled through the troops, Lilith dashed after him, thickening the air behind her and softening the road using the humid air to create a mud trap that would slow down pursuers. Unable to stop his momentum, Lewis flew into Rama's cavalry, knocking over several horses and breaking his shoulder. Grunting in pain, Lewis rolled through the front line, wincing with every turn and twist of his body. His shoulder hit the ground again, and the pain knocked him unconscious. His body continued onward, knocking soldiers back and scattering the ranks. Finally he hit the wall of a bakery, stopping his momentum and breaking his collarbone. His breathing slowed as he lay against the wall. He faded in and out of consciousness, unable to move, sharp pain controlling his body, the honey-sweet aroma of days-old bread filling his nostrils and causing his stomach to gurgle. Hungry and in pain, he groaned, fighting to stay aware of his surroundings. Catching up to Lewis, she found him half unconscious under a rack of bread. Falling to the ground and scraping her knees, she reached out, her arms heavy and her hands shaking. Terrified but determined to help, she checked his pulse and wounds and did her best to stabilize him. Exhausted from the battle, she used up what little stamina she still had and passed out headfirst in his lap. Feeling severe pain at the slightest touch, Lewis forced himself to focus. His pain lessened, but he felt a weight on his legs. Finding Lilith there, he fixed her hair with his good arm, whispering, "Thank you," as he stared out onto the battlefield. Through blurry eyes, he could see Rayleigh and Hirian still fighting in the town square. From out of the mountains and forests to the north, fresh and thirsty for a fight, Lestrygonian infantry charged toward the city. Running for glory and conquest, the giant soldiers shook the ground with their feet as they poured out of the trees and plowed across the fields with reckless speed. Every stride gave the charging giants more momentum. They moved in a frenzy, not caring about their surroundings, trampled the wildlife. Their only goal was reaching their king. Ravina's orders were echoed through the Lestrygonians' army. Her tenacity and bloodlust drove her to the front of the marauding horde. Her unit dashed ahead and into the city as Ravina followed with a flood of blood-starved giants behind her. Filling the gaps in the town, they overflowed and reinforced Hirian. The Cura force sent to help Paul Vale finally arrived, charging their enhanced war horses into the stampeding Lestrygonians. The bulky armored horses, hair flowing like fire, crashed into the reinforcements. The riders, using rifles and powder bombs, slowed the giants down, unleashing a flurry of projectiles guided by sharpened eyesight and bringing down Lestrygonians in a sea of munitions. Finally the giants turned and met the charge head-on. The weight of the horses crushed bones and armor in a violent collision. The war horses stampeded into the army of giants till bodies of warriors and horses alike littered the ground and monstrous cries and groans filled the air. The once beautiful landscape continued its transformation into a land of death as the Cura cavalry chased down panicking giants. In an attempt to turn the situation around, a group of giants turned, facing the horses. The Cura soldiers, pushing too far into the forest, didn't notice the mountainous bodies coming for them. Giant teeth pierced the horses' necks, and riders were ripped from their saddles and crushed beneath their steeds. Explosions of bullets pierced the giants' bone armor and leather clothing, penetrating their thick flesh. Bodies hit the ground in masses, creating speed bumps for those who were retreating. But the trailing riders' horses caught on bone armor and the limbs of fallen Lestrygonians, slowing them down and allowing the giants' long strides to gain them distance from their pursuers. The giants vanished back into the woods, using the thick shadows as cover. Trees shook as the ground continued to rumble, getting slowly softer as the giants' distance from the pursuing army grew. As the cavalry reached the edge of the forest, the fleeing giants vanished into the mountain caves. Bestial roars echoed off the mountainsides. The Cure soldiers turned about and headed out of the woods to rejoin the foot soldiers and scouts who were making their way into Paul Vale. Arriving at Walker's flank, First Sergeant Riley and his men set up a perimeter. They forced their horses to lie down, and Riley's cavalrymen pulled out their rifles, resting the barrels on the side of their horses. Using the animals as shields, they took aim. The experienced soldier gave orders as his nervous men sat ready for another attack. Pushing his way through Walker's force, Riley caught a glimpse of the prince using his ability to manipulate blood. "Isn't that necromancy?" he wondered. Riley turned around, heading back to his command. On reaching his men, he pulled his horse to the ground and readied himself. The soldiers waited wretchedly in silence as their throats tightened from dehydration. Uncomfortable grunts of the horses broke the silence, increasing the tension in the men. Nervousness started to take over. "We aren't soldiers. We were farmers and miners. What does the commander expect us to do?" one of the soldiers asked out loud, setting off a chain reaction of nervous chatter. "Quiet down," the first sergeant said sharply. "You need to stay calm and focused. Being anxious won't help anyone get out of this fight. But your horses will feel your anxiety and get jumpy." The chatter died down, and the men stared silently toward the woods. A tint of evening came over the battlefield. The orange sky made it easier to see the shadows of giants moving through the trees. A single round was fired off a rifle, prompting several others to follow suit. "Hold your fire," Riley yelled. "Save your ammo. Wait till you can see what you shoot." The gunfire died down as the men fell back into an uncomfortable silence, waiting for the next round of attacks. Catching their breath, Rayleigh and Hirian pushed themselves away from each other. Hirian's neck shone as his necklace filtered the raw magic around him, lessening the effects of Rayleigh's power. Still fighting it out in the town square, the colliding armies created heaps of bodies in a ring around them. A massive jolt of electricity hit Rayleigh. The pain brought him to his knees. Not knowing where the lightning came from, he shifted into high gear, regaining his composure and not letting his eyes fall off Hirian. Surprised, Hirian stepped back with his giant stride to gain a little distance. Rayleigh climbed to his feet, lightning arcing from his body. Fighting through the pain, he used his raw anger to control the flames that were eating away at his flesh. His body's machines continued to amplify his natural magnetic field, creating a small storm of visible electricity. The sparks shot off in every direction. At the same time, fire danced down and around his body, mixing with the fire that still encased him. His long black hair, charged with electricity, started to float in the air. Worried for their leader's life in the one-on-one brawl, Hirian's lieutenants closed in around Rayleigh. He expelled energy outward, the electricity acting like Tesla coils and pushing the giants away. The current created forked lightning that flashed and danced through the air, striking Hirian and his lieutenants, and stunning them for an instant. Rayleigh, barely able to control his growing arsenal of abilities, turned his electromagnetic aura off. The air changed around the city. Walker took a step forward, turning into a cloud of black smoke as he moved into striking distance of Hirian, and still aware of Rayleigh, who was unconscious and out of control in his berserk state. Walker's crimson eyes glowed as he felt the electricity in the air relaxing his body. The rich energy he suppressed began to leak out. He started forward, moving dexterously, reading the timing of the energy pulses from Rayleigh's body. Gracefully dodging the arcing lightning, he watched for an opening. The energy shot out at increasing range, keeping those around him pinned down. Using the strikes as cover, Walker flanked the first giant lieutenant, drew his sword in an instant, and cut the giant's head off. Hitting the ground, he dashed to the second lieutenant, sliced his target's tendons, and followed with an upward slash, splitting the man in half. Seeing the next barrage of lightning heading toward him, he danced around it, moving behind Rayleigh and out of range. Sweating and taking a deep breath, Walker sheathed his sword. His crimson eyes turned yellow as he activated his abilities. He reached out in front of him, ripping the blood from the surrounding corpses and transforming it into a wave of spears. He launched them toward the preoccupied king. Catching sight of the blood spikes, Hirian put his hands together, and slammed them into the ground. It exploded upwards, creating a wall around him. The building swayed from the impact, but the shield of earth blocked the barrage of blood spears as they pierced and shattered everything outside. Walker focused his power on Hirian. The blood spears shattered, sending shards in every direction. Rayleigh raised a hand, absorbing the hardened blood and using the nutrients to replenish his energy and regenerate his body. Walker was caught by surprise at Rayleigh's power over blood. For a moment, he stopped moving. Questions raced through his mind. He collected himself and returned his attention to Hirian. The bodies around them dissolved into liquid, adding to Walker's arsenal as he continued the barrage of necromantic power. His connection to the veil grew stronger, increasing the potency of his manipulations. Fighting at a distance to avoid interference from Rayleigh, he continued to fire spears of giant's blood at the exhausted Hirian. Slamming his foot down, Hirian created a tremor that knocked Walker off balance and broke his spell. Catching himself and recovering, Walker dashed away, holding a hand out toward Hirian. Bodies around Hirian and Rayleigh exploded, wounding both men. Rayleigh's powerful self-healing repaired his damaged flesh, pushing out the shrapnel. His eyes shifted towards Walker, causing the young prince to freeze momentarily. Then he broke free of Rayleigh's gaze and put himself in a position to engage with the horde of giants. Allowing himself to enjoy the moment, he felt his connection to the veil increase once more. A voice echoed through his head, but unable to make out the words, Walker pushed it away. His skin was clammy and cold, and he felt the raw embrace of arms wrap around him. The remaining giant corpses rose, feasting off Walker's power, and he raised a small squad around Rayleigh, giving the crazed warrior a bit of defense. Then he returned to the puddles of blood, sending another wave of spears toward Hirian. The brown sky turned crimson as the red moon shone down its blood-tinted light. Rayleigh's eyes, glazed over with blood, looked dead and lifeless. He stood still, gripping his broken weapon, surrounded by undead giants. At the sight of their risen comrades' broken flesh, the giants entering the square stopped in fear. Chapter 8. The pressure of rage. The barrage of blood had done little to slow down the giant king behind the concrete and marble wall. Hirian pulled himself out from behind his shield and found his enemy in front of him. Rayleigh stood still facing Hirian, his eyes glazed over, the air filled with iron as if the moon wore a shade of blood. Walker continued to fire off projectiles. Each blood lance he ripped from the fallen giants exploded outward on impact, shattering Rayleigh's armor and piercing his skin, the nutrients of the blood helping his muscles to recover. Rivers of blood formed, filling the square up to Rayleigh's calves. He stayed motionless as his body worked to repair the damage he had taken. The remains of the Lestragonian army reached Hirian, closing ranks around him. They made a wall between their king and remaining forces, and Rayleigh. Entering the central area of the city, the Cure clan plugged the only exit from the square. Rows of horsemen filled the northern passages. Clearing out the edges of the square, Yoshi and Berlin stopped to catch their breath. Bear, the kid gives the impression he's doing well. Yoshi reeled his chained sickles in from a Lestragonian corpse. Something's wrong with him, though, Berlin said as he slammed his mace down with force, shaking the blood free of the head. The air reeks of rot. We should be careful going into the square. Berlin smashed the mace into a concrete light post. The heavy weapon rested as Berlin took in more of the surroundings. Walker continued his assault on the giant's leader while Rayleigh continued to rest idly in the middle of the battlefield, enthralled by the veil, unable to move. Watching the action, Berlin and Yoshi weighed the benefits of charging into the square. Looks like Walker is up to his old calculating tricks. That guy would sacrifice his own family if it meant an advantage. Berlin rubbed the blood from his face. Man, he always lets loose in bloodbaths, and we have to contain the fallout. Yoshi, looking to the south, caught a glimpse of the forces there. Tyrene and Rama are up to something too. He turned his attention to the two leaders. They probably sense a change coming in the battle. They both have a feel for those things. I remember, Yoshi said. We should watch for an opportunity, my friend. He closed his eyes and took in a big breath. We need to watch the cures as well. They're planning something too. Berlin hefted his mace. The wolf shed was finally cleaned of the crusted blood and entrails. We shouldn't worry about that too much. Let us help out in the square. What do you have in mind? Wedge, break, and create an opening for Rayleigh. Gripping the weapon's handle, he took a giant step forward, watching the barricade of earth and bodies surrounding Hirion. The two men struggled to keep balance as the ground beneath them rumbled. Berlin pointed to the horde with an oversized arm. I guess we take that as our cue. He raised his mace, rallying the soldiers behind him, and with broad movements rushed into the square, leading his men into an engagement with Hirion's reinforcements. His mace connecting with the bodies of giants, Berlin cleared a path through the colossal army. Exploding with strength, the half-giant shattered bone armor and exposed the bare flesh beneath. Sensing an opportunity, Yoshi twirled the chain blades around his body, creating a spinning blade. Tearing muscle from bone, he followed Berlin, and working in tandem they crippled Hirion's reinforcements. Lewis had regained enough strength to get to his feet. He forced himself up to look out at the battlefield. Whistling, he summoned one of the mountless horses in the area. Waking up with a bit more energy, Lilith jumped to her feet. Remembering that she was in a war zone and seeing Lewis, she moved over to him sluggishly. He waited, leaning against the horse. The animal's hot breath ruffled his hair. He mounted with Lilith's help and headed into the Forenza cavalry, making his way to the front. Tyrene! He cried out as he approached his commander. Tyrene turned at his name, surprised to see Lewis balanced atop the horse. Lilith's magic gripped his limp body in place. Lewis, you look like shit, he said with a relieved smile. Well, sir, I can't feel my legs, and I'm quite sure my lungs punctured. Lilith is heading into the square. She plans on supporting Rayleigh from afar. Is she crazy? Rama interjected. That soldier is unstable. And as far as we can tell, he sees everyone as an enemy. Lilith has an idea, sir. I know you're planning something, but before you make a decision, please hear it. What's she thinking of, son? Tyrene asked, as he continued to look Lewis over. Lilith is going to gather Walker, Yoshi, Berlin, and Kramer and whittle down the giant king's army. We can provide support with the remaining armies, Rama responded. She plans to use extensive manipulations. You should avoid entering the square. Her mass elemental energies are too dynamic. If she loses concentration or gets overwhelmed, anomalies could form, wiping the whole town off the map. Let's not interfere with the conflict in the center of the town. Let's focus on dealing with the enemies around us. Leaving Rayleigh to fight alone? Are you crazy? Rama demanded. One man can't survive an onslaught like that. Sir, I don't know what's going on with Rayleigh, but he is more than capable, and it seems like he's been evolving during the fight. He resembles a demon, and he's growing stronger and more dominant as the fight continues. Besides, if we get too close, he'll probably kill us. Tyrene turned to Rama. If our orders are to save as much of the town as possible, we should create an escape route for the Lestragonians, bait them out of the city. Once they're fleeing, we pick off those we can. Rama nodded thoughtfully. Make it clear, but not obvious. Make it look like a mistake. Tyrene, remembering something, answered. We should force them north. The church built an old fort we can trap them in. Agreeing to the plan, Rama called over his squad commanders and passed on absolute orders not to enter the square even by accident. A crimson moon smothered in black clouds consumed the dark energy saturating the air, spreading chaotic power across the sky. Lightning and fire encircled the square and danced off the lake of blood. Rayleigh's eyes were opening, growing with anger, hatred fueling every fiber and every muscle. He jerked upward from a bent-over position as if waking from a dream and screamed out a war cry, straining his throat and stunning the enemies near him. In the blink of an eye, Rayleigh absorbed the blood, healing himself entirely. Caught off guard, Walker backed out of the square, his attention on Rayleigh as the other man absorbed blood and rejuvenated his body. Lowering his head and analyzing what was in front of him, Rayleigh sent the remaining blood exploding in every direction in a wave of aerial spikes. It erupted outward in every direction, booming and disorienting, slowing the giant's actions and those of the nearby Firenze forces. Rayleigh dashed forward explosively, covering the distance to Hirian in an instant and rendering the fortification useless. With grandiose swings, he cut down Hirian's soldiers, weakening the wall around the resting king while dodging attacks from left and right. An explosion of blood caused giant pearls of crimson liquid to rain from the sky. The front guard was shredded by sword attacks, ripping bone and flesh from their bodies. Like shrapnel, the debris of bodies tore through the second row of defense, setting off a chain reaction of body fluid and bone through every person in the perimeter. Hirian's eyes widened as the rest of his soldiers transformed into blood, bone, and flesh. Shaking off his shock, Hirian took a step back from Rayleigh. He slipped as his foot caught a dismembered arm, and stumbled backward looking for an escape. Rayleigh absorbed some residual blood, healing the damage he'd taken from the exploding corpses. Fully recovered and bursting with vigor, he took a step forward. Hirian retreated quickly as Rayleigh's cold red eyes fixed on him. Appearing behind Walker, Lilith began fortifying herself, using elemental manipulation on her own body. She covered her skin in a thin mud-like substance as durable as steel, and then used by lightning to increase her speed. You're planning something reckless, Lilith. You're acting strange. Rayleigh's rage started when I was injured outside of the town. If I hadn't been unconscious, he wouldn't have had to push himself so hard. I could have given our forces proper support. Rayleigh's eaten up a lot of our enemy's resources, but I need to quell his anger before it grows too strong and he turns on us. I don't know how he has blood control. Still, his abilities surpass anything I ever imagined. His connection to the Veil must be immensely strong. You need to be careful if you approach him. I enhanced my speed and durability. I'm going to create a box, trapping the giant's leader and Rayleigh inside. It won't hold them forever, but it might let us subdue Rayleigh if things end quickly. If we're lucky, we'll kill the enemy general and end this soon. A thick blanket of fog fell upon the city. The air grew heavier, and the tension affected the Firenze soldiers. A silent whisper of blood and iron carried across the town square. Rama raised his hand and flashed silent orders to his men. The cavalry formed into two columns and rode off to the west and east, surrounding the square and killing off isolated giants as they pushed into position. Slowly bringing his arm down, and taking the reins of his warhorse, Rama felt the hair on his neck stand up. There was an unscratchable itch in the back of his throat. He moved his head to the right, just avoiding a blood spike screaming through the air right at him. He drew his curved blade. "Stay together, do not falter, keep moving forward," he said, doing his best to keep his men from becoming collateral damage to Rayleigh and Hirian's slugfest. Giant shadows continued to sneak through the northern wood. Hirian's reinforcements made their way down the mountainside and through the caves, long spears tied to their backs, sneaking around the Kura cavalry to enter the city through a guarded back alley. Killing the lookouts, they worked their way south until they reached the town square. Ravina moved into an advantageous position and peered into the courtyard to see the surroundings and the forces securing the square. Stepping forward with long flowing dirty blonde hair, eyes as blue as the sky. Her muscles tightened as she saw her people's bodies littered across the courtyard. Noticing the Kura cavalry to the east, she stepped back into concealment. She hugged the alley wall and returned to the spear women she'd arrived with. Ravina! A smaller-than-average Lestragonian spear sister approached the captain. "Speak, Kalirina." Ravina pushed back her flowing, dirty blonde hair behind her shoulders and looked at the other with sharpened and focused eyes. "Cavalry is heading toward us from the south. Our sisters are in position and will engage at any moment." "I see. Fall in line. We're going to get our king out of the square." She adjusted her leather cuirasses and gripped her iron-tipped bone spears, preparing to leap in and slaughter the unsuspecting horse riders. She gave the order, and half her detachment engaged. Expecting an attack, the Kura leader ordered half his cavalry to face north and prepare for an incoming spell. "Take aim! Snipers don't leave anyone alive!" The order echoed through the alley and adjacent streets. When it reached her ears, Ravina gripped her spear and charged into the square, avoiding the bodies of her clansmen. Her soldiers followed, till they reached Hirian. Beaten down and worn out from a fight for the first time, Stunned, she ordered her spearwomen to make a barricade of half-exploded corpses and other materials. They quickly set up a small wall of bodies between their king and the panting monster in front of them. She felt a sudden chill run down her bones. Goosebumps spread across her skin. She continued throwing bodies anywhere she could create speed bumps. The rest of her squad grabbed their exhausted king and pulled back into the northern alley. Sensing a growing threat and seeing the distance growing between himself and Hirian, Rayleigh, reinvigorated, moving with enthusiasm, he stalked forward. His inner energy leaked out, dissolving the nearby corpses, stealing their blood, healing the damage as he continued into each heavy spear head-on without caring. He picked up his pace and started sprinting, speeding up with every step, and finally burst out into the plains. Carrying her leader, Ravina was making good progress retreating north. A moment of panic seized her as the enraged enemy moved toward her and the king. She was moving through the thick of the bodies in an attempt to slow down her pursuer. Making his way up out of the city, Rayleigh closed the distance across the littered battlefield, absorbing the bodies planted by the clashing armies. Ladies of the Spear, lay down your life for our king. Ravina bellowed. She reached the hardened giant warriors, and the Hellion Spear Sisters exploded forward in an attempt to slow down Rayleigh's pursuit. He dodged the incoming projectiles instinctively and pushed on towards his target, his subconscious driving him to end the fight with Hirian. His speed continued to increase till he flashed ahead looking like he was teleporting. A wind wall intercepted the airborne weapons, cutting their speed in half. As giants turned their backs and fled from combat, Ravina's words cut into them. You will sacrifice yourself for the king's retreat, or you will die by my spears. The Amazonian women kept up the attack, slowing down Hirian's pursuers and creating enough distance to let Ravina carry off her useless king. Through the blood of their people, Ravina and Hirian made it out of the forest to the north. She willed herself to carry the king onward, deep into the ghoul-ridden plains. The Darklings could detect Ravina's fatigue and were drawn toward her. Alert and focused, the giant woman was driven by the ghouls to an astonishing speed. When she stopped to let air into her lungs, she felt Hirian move, causing her to lose her grip. Grunting, she dropped his body. She growled, disgusted at herself. Lestragonian society did not tolerate failure. Leadership was intended for the strong, to propagate their race. Ravina's ears picked up movements in the golden grass. She reached down, seized Hirian, and carried him deeper into the bleached fields. Choosing to hold their ground, the giant women turned and ready for combat. Some engaged Rayleigh directly while others in the back continued to throw spears. Dodging all the attacks as if seeing them before they happened, he ignored the women and moved past them. He took a deep breath. The earthiness of Hirian's scent lingered in the air, and he pressed on, seeing everyone else as irrelevant. Rayleigh reached out to a shadowy figment of Hirian as his body gave out once more. The enormous toll on his body continued to grow, and he felt sharp pains as the power within depleted. He fell to the ground face first. Seeing an opportunity, two spear sisters dashed out to strike. As their spears closed in, they exploded. Lilith had made her way through the forest and reached Rayleigh's muddied body. The spears came in contact with the strong wind she'd made from circulating natural energy. Molding a wall of wind, Lilith created duplicate spears of wind and fired them back, piercing the giant women and ripping off their skin with the force of a hurricane. She pulled Rayleigh up to herself, keeping the man from drowning in the sodden earth, and turned him over, wiping his face and freeing him to take deep breaths of fresh air. You've turned into quite a wild card. If we survive this, perhaps I should ally myself with you to solve a personal problem down the road. Rayleigh's body had all but shut down, but he began to breathe more deeply. As his muscles tore and rebuilt themselves, he screamed out suddenly in pain, You're like a machine upgrading yourself to be faster and more capable. I hope that all the pain doesn't drive you insane. With all that adrenaline pumping through you, it wouldn't be surprising if you've already suffered some mental degradation. But if you can survive this, I could sure use your strength. Resting a hand on his chest, she felt every fluctuation as Rayleigh continued to fight for breath. Overcome with emotion, Lilith gave in to her feelings, amplifying her magic. She conjured up the raw power of the wind, and the speed of the air picked up. Then she tapped into the dark energies she learned to harness from her master. The wind took on a red hue and traveled outward, incapacitating the Lestrygonians still in the area, ripping flesh from bone in a tornado of elemental power. The wind ripped trees from the forest, splintering the wood. She willed the air forward, clearing a path ahead. Lilith allowed herself to be free for the first time. She poured all her feelings into the manipulation, releasing her full reserves of arcanum, and the energy added to the tornado's force like a never-ending battery. Her spell fully charged, she relaxed her body and began drawing in arcanum again to store for later use. She felt the energy within her, and became enveloped in it. Her stamina slowly began to replenish, restoring her mental acuity. She looked over Rayleigh's body and, not seeing any physical injuries, she injected some of the arcanum she had gathered into him, trying to restore his mind. Raising her head, she scanned the battlefield. Cries of terror echoed off the trees, making her shiver. The air had grown colder, and a brisk early evening breeze carried through the forest toward the city. The sound of horses reverberated through the ground from behind her. Lilith stayed low to the ground, gripping Rayleigh tightly, sharing the warmth of her body. Her eyes grew heavy, and it was getting hard to stay awake. Rayleigh jerked up once and then went limp, falling back down into her arms. She could feel the spasms in his muscles as the nanomachines continued to do their repairs and improvements. They lay silent in the woods. Lilith kept reminding herself that they were still in danger to keep from falling asleep. She probed the area, using the wind to enhance her senses and detect changes in the air and find the life force of any organisms around her. Chapter 9. Dark Ritual. After clearing out the inner city, Rama ordered his scouts to push into the surrounding forest and pick off any stragglers. Squads of 15 headed north and west to verify the fleeing Lestrygonians' whereabouts. Moving in from the north and east were the Cure soldiers, led by Enzo Cure. The vampiric clan swept the battlefield, consuming the fallen giants' bodies and increasing their own strength. Rama took in the sights from his saddle, breathing in the vile air of the city. When Enzo entered the town square, he raised a hand in acknowledgement. "You survived again, Rama. You're always finding yourself in these shit shows." Smiling, he led his men in. "Why are you here?" "I didn't receive any information about the Cures getting involved in this mess. I was asked to do a favor by a friend. Minimize the damage as much as I could." "May I ask who?" "It doesn't matter. All that matters is we got here in time to help a bit." Walker, smothered in sweat and blood, walked gingerly toward the two leaders. "Lieutenant! Where do you need me?" Rama looking down at the prince. "Find Lilith. Her crazy decision to pursue Rayleigh is giving me a bad feeling. Help them with whatever fighting is left and bring them both back." "Yes, sir." The bloody prince turned north and headed toward the forest. Breathing in the stale air, Walker followed the trail of blood until the scent of lavender struck his senses. He followed it into a cleared area where the trees had been pulled by their roots from the ground. He moved forward and saw Lilith and Rayleigh. An intense rush of wind pounded against him, bruising his flesh as Lilith angrily continued to manipulate the elements. "Hey, the fight's over!" Walker yelled, his voice distorted by the wind. It barely reached her. She let up on the spell, finally running out of energy. Rayleigh lay unconscious on the ground next to her. "Are you all right, Damon Principem?" Walker asked as he carefully made his way closer. "It appears you added your own flavor to this chaos, Lilith. I'm not in the mood for your sarcasm." The exhausted woman removed her hand from Rayleigh's chest and rose to her feet. "Why are you here and not in the square?" "I'm here to aid in the capture or killing of the fleeing Lestrygonians' leader." "Which way did they go? And is Rayleigh okay to continue?" "I don't know," she said, looking down at his battered body. Walker was taken back by how fierce the man looked even when lying unconscious. "Walker, the last I saw of Hirian, he was being carried off by a giant woman. They were heading north." "All right." Walker lifted Rayleigh's heavy body onto his shoulders. "Let's go put an end to the day's events." They moved north together, continuing Rayleigh's pursuit. When they reached the open fields, the funk of rotting corpses overpowered Lilith's senses. "Ghouls," Walker said, pointing. The feral pack was stalking the tired Ravina and her weakened king. Flanking the ghouls, Lilith fired off a blast of lightning, piercing their flesh and adding the smell of charred, decaying bodies to the stench. To the right of Ravina and Hirian, Walker positioned himself for an ambush. When they got close, he stopped the blood flow in their bodies, knocking Ravina unconscious. She dropped the wounded king to the ground as she fell to her knees. Walker stopped beside Lilith, waiting for an opportunity to complete his task. He let his senses spread across the plain, searching for more ferals, as he created a prison of blood around Hirian and Ravina. He set the unconscious Rayleigh down as he approached the giants. He felt the eyes of the scavengers on him. Mixing his mental energies, he picked the two giants up. "We need to report back to Rama," he said to Lilith. "There are signs of humans in that fort. They may need our help." Father Canis poked his head out, studying the situation and eyeing the prince. A loud eruption came from the forest. The frightening levels of magic paralyzed everyone, even causing the ghouls to cower in fear. "There's no bloodlust in that energy, but the power is so heavy I can barely breathe." Walker fell to the ground, releasing Hirian and Ravina from his grasp. The raw energy awakened Rayleigh. Still suffering from the bloodlust, his instincts took over and he began searching the horizon for the threat. He felt the gaze of primordial eyes on him. The colossal creature stayed hidden in the darkness of the forest, but the trees waved fiercely as the ground shook. Rayleigh gave into his fear and rage and lunged toward the forest, lashing out dangerously in every direction. Seeing the threat, Alfric emerged from the fort with blade in hand and released a bit of his energy, causing Rayleigh to focus on him. The priest slowly approached the raging warrior, trying to talk him down. "Shit," Walker said as he reached out, trying to bind Rayleigh in place. Alfric's body, remembering its training, reacted to the threat before him. Lunging forward, Alfric attempted to pierce the enraged Rayleigh. Rolling out of the way, Rayleigh moved closer. Dropping his blade, Alfric reached out and grabbed Rayleigh by his arm, pushing the out-of-control daemon away from the fort. Then he picked up his sword and sheathed it. Seeing the situation escalate, Walker yelled, "Lilith, I need your help. I can't restrain Rayleigh and keep the giants imprisoned. I don't have the stamina." Focusing her power into the ground, Lilith creating a pit of mud to slow Rayleigh down. Alfric released more energy, creating a defensive wall around himself as he carefully backed away. As Rayleigh lunged toward Alfric, his hands seemed big enough to block out the light. Remembering his foot techniques, Alfric moved out of harm's way, drew his blade again, and swiped it down with precision on Rayleigh's arm. Taking the blow without flinching, Rayleigh tried to overpower the priest. Darting from right to left, Alfric stabbed Rayleigh's legs, shattering the blade but crippling the warrior. Rayleigh's regenerative powers began working almost immediately. Lilith used all the arcanum she had gathered to summon gravitational forces and pin Rayleigh in place. Fight through the manipulations, Rayleigh tried to counter her, but she increased the gravity around him, crushing his lungs and knocking him unconscious. Falling down onto his backside, Alfric exhaled in relief. He felt a sharp pain in his ribs, where a sizable bruise was developing. "What a monstrous man," he said to himself. He got his legs under him and walked back to the fort, closing the gates behind him. Lilith focused on controlling Rayleigh's movements, sensing no immediate threats. She and Walker took the opportunity to catch their breath. Several hours later, the gates to the fort opened again. Alfric emerged waving a hand. Walker did not let his guard down. Another priest appeared at the gates carrying a child on his back. Behind the worn-out clergyman, knights stood guard. Walker raised his hands, showing he had no ill intent. He spoke to the first priest. "It's over. I've been ordered to end the fighting and bring my comrades and the prisoners back to the city. You're all welcome to come with us. I'm sure my commanding officers would like to speak to you." The priest looked Walker in the eyes, searching for signs of treachery. Finally he gripped his sword and came out, gesturing to those he'd sworn to protect. "All right, everyone. Collect your things. The battle is over, and we're heading back into town." Veru, the overbearing commander, stood behind the priest giving directions to the scared villagers. "Children, line up 2 by 2. Find a buddy and stick with them. Adults, do the same. We're leaving now." The villagers excitedly grabbed the few weapons, clothes, and other things they had grabbed when fleeing the battle. Alfric stood outside the fort, surveying the area. A soft voice broke his concentration. You pulled those survivors through. I hope they appreciate how rare it is to survive an incident like this. Lilith appeared at his side. These people don't need to appreciate me. It's my duty to see them through this. He gestured at Rayleigh. The unconscious one over there is your colleague? He's a terrifying monster. Lilith was staring at Rayleigh, dangling from Walker's back. Yeah, he surprised us all today. I wonder why he attacked you. He almost killed me. It might have been my fault, so I won't hold a grudge. But I am concerned for the safety of the villagers. Your fault? Lilith asked, surprised. I released too much of my energy. I'm out of practice, and he probably perceived me as an enemy. From what I saw, you fended him off rather well. That's what I meant about your rarity. Most priests would have run and left those people behind. A gruff voice interrupted Lilith. Father Canis is a hero. He always chooses selflessness, and he will always choose the right thing even at the cost of his own comfort. Rarity does not begin to describe him. Vera looked Lilith and Walker over as he directed the townsfolk out of the fort. What happened in the city? Alfric asked. We attacked the Lestragonians from the southern gate, losing most of our army. We thought the initial push into the city was a failure. Our friend managed to change that in minutes. We ultimately took back the city because of him. Looking at Rayleigh, Lilith's tired eyes showed softness. The cost of the victory might be his sanity. Commander Vera moved closer. That thing you're carrying might have given us a scare, but these people will never forget how he saved them. I don't know what's going on with him, but to do the things you described, he must be an Ashura. Vera, don't make claims like that. Alfric said avidly. I'm only telling the truth. Even if he's not a battle god, he's going to be a real pain in the ass for the Pantheon to deal with. Especially if he learns to control his power. I've heard of Berserker's blood, but this was the first time I saw such power. Walker turned around after overhearing the two holy men. Don't you worry about him. He's our rookie, and we'll deal with him our way. Lilith smiled as she joined Walker. I'm sure he'll be in trouble with the higher-ups. This idiot broke ranks, so he'll probably be under lock and key for a while. Straight-faced and exhausted, Walker headed back toward his prisoners. Using the blood bubble, he lifted their bodies and continued in the direction of the town. On the outskirts of Paul Vale, the Firenze army was killing wounded giants. Oh, you found the pup. Tyrene and Berlin emerged from the forest with the survivors of their company. He made a mess of those giants. Who would have guessed our nervous little recruit could do this much damage? Berlin took Rayleigh's body from Walker, lifting it like a doll. A loud grumbling broke through the other noise. I'm starving, boss. I hope we've got something good to eat tonight. Tyrene smiled, and the rest of the group laughed at their own rumbling stomachs and weak legs. We'll have to see what's available in the town after we make camp. But don't get your hopes up. Most of our supplies were lost. Seeing the scared faces of the locals, Tyrene smiled and headed over to greet them, loosening up his posture. He spread his arms wide and did his best to appear friendly. You are under our protection until we're back in the city and the church's relief force arrives. Expressions of relief came over the townsfolk, followed by fatigue. The clergy has been contacted, and support is on its way. He gestured for them to follow him. Footsteps and light chatter echoed through the forest. What kind of ability is that? Is that a blood sphere? Is the enemy trapped in it? These Daemon types sure have scary techniques. Walker ignored them and continued to lead his prisoners back to Rama and the rest of the military. In the town they passed ruined buildings and broken roads. In the town square, they found the Cure and Firenze armies setting up camp and burning bodies. Ash filled the air, and the horrific groans and squeals of ghouls cried out in hunger. They would soon make their way into the city, scavenging flesh from corpses. What the hell is that stench? The air is saturated with the smell of rotting flesh being burned. Lieutenant Rama, sir, we're hearing weird singing and laughing from the eastern blocks. Rama sat drinking coffee while looking through his notes and writing his report. The chatter made him lose his train of thought. Don't stand outside all night. Come in and tell me what's going on. Sir, we have word of a large gathering of darklings and ghouls in the vicinity. Do we have patrols assigned to that area? We've set up a 1-block containment area. The disturbance is 5 blocks from our guard posts, and seems to be heading out of the city in the direction of the farms. Rama stood, let out a hefty sigh, and dusted himself off. He drained the coffee in a few gulps. I need 5 volunteers to patrol the area. His men, exhausted and incoherent, missed the request. Rama began thinking about morale and continued on until he reached a fire where Tyreen, Berlin, Lewis, Walker, and Yoshi sat in a circle, roasting a deer Berlin had caught. You guys still look lively. Tyreen turned. Attention! The small group of soldiers stood up. Well, at least you're aware enough to hear me. Yes, sir. What can we do for you? I have reports of music and strange laughter to the east of the plaza. I need 5 people to check it out. I'll send Yoshi and Lewis. They should be enough to handle anything running around in the night. As you wish, Captain. Yoshi and Lewis stood up, leaving behind their cooking dinner, and disappeared into the darkness. I'm just going to sit here, Rama said gingerly, taking a seat on some rubble. Tyreen, how's your rookie doing? He's still out cold, sir. The officer answered. Lilith is with him? Yes, sir. Good to hear. So what the hell was that? I've never seen anything like it. Tyreen reached for a flask of fermented tea and poured some into a cup. Paris was the last time I saw anything like it. Really? I wasn't enlisted until after that. During the battle, the church leader lost his shit. He had just ordered 1,000 men to their deaths. But one of the soldiers went on a slaughtering spree. It was surprising because the church rails against us altered, calling us vampires and demons. Anyway, this guy tore through the rebel army, growing stronger with every dead body. I can guess what happened next. The church turned on him. Correct. I was an auxiliary soldier for the Holy City's army. This guy was one of their holy knights. He tore through the church's army and changed the battle's focus. We spent the next 48 hours isolating and wearing him down. Rayleigh isn't the same soldier? No, he's not. That man was killed. Which is why when Rayleigh went berserk, it threw me off. What's going to happen to him now, sir? Rama stared into his cup. I have to write it down and pass it up. Yes, sir. Anyway, my friend, it will be out of our hands. The two sat in silence as they consumed the rest of the tea. Drums of fire crackled like a jazz band as a man's laughter echoed down the alleyways. Lewis and Yoshi followed the laughter and dancing shadows. Looking to his side, Lewis caught a glimpse of Walker's face. The prince was moving in the other direction, shaking his head. I bet you 20-1 it's Kramer. That goddamn lunatic is barbecuing corpses. I won't take that bet. The two reached the end of the block, where they found Kramer naked and covered in blood, dancing and matching the movements of the creatures around him. Ghouls danced around the fire, their eyes entranced, glowing with an orange hue as they tore into giant flesh and spurted blood into the humid air. Yoshi raised his scarred hands. You dumbass, what are you doing? Kramer's eyes fell on him, but he kept dancing. Yelling louder, rattling the ghouls, Yoshi called out again. Don't you dare look at me that way. Get your murderous ass down here. In a single movement, Kramer jumped over the fire, flinging blood in every direction with a smile, and landing in front of Yoshi, dousing the already irritated warrior with blood. Yoshi lowered his shoulders and drove a punch between Kramer's eyes. The battle is over. Pull yourself together. We don't have the patience for your stupid antics. Kramer looked confused. Blood from his nose ran down to his lips. Antics. I was performing a ritual blood dance for the emergence of a new god. A new blood god? Yoshi glared at Kramer, fists clenched. Lewis, sensing Yoshi's irritation, caught his arm. Enough, Yoshi. We don't have time to play around with Kramer. And the ghouls are starting to look at us like snacks. He grabbed Kramer, and the three turned back toward the camp. Kramer, now walking free, asked a sincere question. How's the new guy doing? He's touch and go at the moment, but Lilith is taking care of him. Lewis said, looking up at the red moon. The demon queen is taking care of him. Interesting development. Laughing theatrically, Kramer pulled out his blades and started juggling. I'm going to get some rest, Lewis said as they reached the camp. Kramer, don't go running off again. If you do, I'll run those blades right through you. Yoshi headed back to the tent Berlin had set up. The air was filled with a hearty aroma of herbs and stewing meats. Berlin? I'm back, buddy, Yoshi said, raising his tired arms. Awesome. Did you guys find that asshole? Yeah. We brought him back to camp. He's with the lieutenant, Yoshi said, looking into the pot of food Berlin was stirring. The pepper made his eyes water. Well, I guess if he's in Lieutenant Rama's sights, he can't cause too much trouble. Berlin cleared his throat, spitting out some phlegm. Maybe. Yoshi's voice was laced with fatigue. The food's almost done. I packed away some bear meat, just waiting for it to tenderize. Berlin pulled some seasonings from his pack. Sounds great. By the way, have you checked in on Lilith and Rayleigh? I have. He's doing a lot better. He's conscious now, but barely, and fatigued. I overheard that the Forenza elders are looking for him. He stirred the small cauldron, and a thick fog of aromatics escaped. You think Walker had something to do with it? Yoshi's question made Berlin sit up. No. By now, word of what went on here must have spread. And reinforcements from the church have arrived. Paladins had been sent to reinforce the perimeter. Paladins, huh? Did the lieutenant say anything? Nope. Now let's eat and get some rest. I'm sure with the church nearby, fights will break out. We're going to need to be at our best just in case. He handed Yoshi a bowl full of meat. Yoshi took a seat near the fire, holding the bowl up to his nose to take a whiff. I agree, buddy. Plus, your cooking always smells fantastic. Hand out blankets and water to the survivors. Doctors spread out and set up medical tents to treat the injured. Paladins set up a perimeter and lock down the area around the camp. Finally, do not engage with demons. We are working with them to set up relief for Paul Vale. Knight General, we found Father Alfric and Knight Commander Veru. They're eating stew and drinking water now. They don't have any major injuries. The Knight General pointed to his subordinate. Lead me to them. I want to know what happened. Yes, sir. They're this way. The young soldier led his commanding officer over to the refugees. Sitting silently among the frightened and exhausted villagers, the priest and the knight commander finally had a chance to take a breath. They stared into a campfire while discussing the day's events. You guys talking about something interesting? Alfric glanced to his left and saw the general approaching. Knight General Silver! I didn't know you were here. He stood up and extended an arm in a welcoming gesture. I just arrived. Once I heard you were involved, Alfric, I thought it would be prudent to find out from you just what happened. So we can start dealing with the political fallout. Let's begin at the point when we arrived here. They sat down, and Alfric outlined the events of the last few days, helped occasionally by Veru. He concluded with his short battle with Rayleigh. Did you use your power, Alfric? I did. I had no choice to protect the people. These villagers put their trust in the church and me. Did anyone notice anything? No. I only used my eyes. But Veru already knows what I'm capable of, to some extent. And even he knows that I'm considered taboo by the cardinals. I don't care about the cardinals or their taboos. It's all nonsense and make-believe. Now what about this soldier from the demons that turned the tide and defeated the giant king? I'd like to see a monster like that. You're going to kill him? He shook his head. From what you tell me, I don't have anything to fear as long as I'm not a threat. So I have no intention of even reporting his existence. What do you mean? The weakened priest asked. Alfric, your instincts have dulled since you were exiled to the priesthood. Anyone who can best Tyrion would leave more than minor injuries if he felt you were an enemy. He might have been able to sense your intentions. At the same time, he was berserk. Out of control. Alfric looked around the area, then took a deep, tired breath. That would make him a god of war, much like yourself, I bet, the general said. He may become an invaluable friend later on. You're planning something? Things need to change. I'm counting on you, as I have in the past. Still, you need to get your instincts back. Being a priest won't make that easy. Then you'll just have to become a paladin again and work your way back up. You don't have that authority, Silver. I just gave myself that authority. Veru spoke up between loud slurps of tea. I think the idea is a good one, Alfric. You've been hiding out in the priesthood for too long. Take back your glory and correct the lies about you. Restore your honor. You saved the order. You're a hero. It's time for everyone to know. And you have the support of the commanders? General Silver looked at Veru. Support of the commanders? Interesting. All the current commanders were there. We all know the truth. And if Alfric accepts your offer, I'll follow him and help however I can. You two are putting me in a position where I can't say no. Alfric tilted his head back, catching a glimpse of night birds flying. He thought about the benefits of joining the Paladins and of staying where he was. You can't hide from your destiny forever, my friend. At some point, it will force you into a decision. I just decided to take the risk and give you a choice. Alfric lowered his head. Looking deadpan at his old friend and commander, he said, Fine, I accept. Silver raised a hand and called over his aide, a small man who seemed to be organized with an extra touch of cleanliness. Soldier, go bring out the coffee and the brandy. I think my friends here have earned a treat. Alfric, Veru, we're going to toast the changing winds. The small soldier efficiently pulled out coffee beans and ground them while boiling water over the open flame. Adding the grounds to the liquid, he eyeballed the water until it started to change color. Then he reached with tiny hands into his bag and pulled out coffee filters. Using two, he strained the brew into a clean copper pot. Alfric and Veru sat quietly as the general poured them each a cup. Then all three faced the golden fire, slowly sipping the black liquid. Alfric and Veru felt the tension in their bodies relax some more. Looking up from his cup, Veru addressed his commanding officer. What are your plans, sir? I want to investigate the 3 soldiers you met, and the squad they belong to. My gut is in uncomfortable knots right now. I also have terrible news to share. Where is Reginald Aubrey? He's with the other junior officers, getting chow and rest, Veru answered. I see. I'm absorbing the remainder of your detachment into my command. I'll give you time to recuperate and provide new orders in a couple of days. Take the time to collect your thoughts and emotions. I fear we'll all need to be at our best for what's to come. Alfric and Veru let General Silver's words sink in as they enjoyed the treat he'd left them. How do you think Reginald will take the news about his brother? Good question. They always seemed to be at odds with each other, but there's no doubt they were close. I hope Reggie doesn't get some dumb idea about revenge. It won't end well. It never does. Audrey asked me to come to Paul Vale, you know. He said if a miracle could happen, maybe I could spark it. I never imagined that conversation would be our last. He took the steaming cup from his lips. I never understood your relationship with Audrey. By all accounts, you should have been enemies, but you were close. Just close enough to make Reginald uneasy. I'll find the time to speak to him at a later date. Alfric reached out to the fire, taking more coffee for himself. Chapter 10. Awakening Fate. Strong winds and terrible weather blanket the land, allowing festering corpses to fertilize the golden fields. The appalling stench of blood and rotting flesh continued to flow into the small city, lowering the workers' morale. I would like to request mechanical laborers to speed up the much-needed repair work. Sirs, the land is primed and ready for reconstruction. Villagers are hard at work rebuilding their homes and places of business. Lord Dino has worked out a deal with Lord Hamish for supplies, as we don't now have enough to go around. In the wake of the tragedy, a large influx of people have relocated to the city to make new lives for themselves. The local forensic magistrate and the mayor have created a government body for the town. This mayor, Rob Stein, gives the appearance of someone capable enough. Still, a change in leadership may be needed in the future. Building materials have been shipped in, along with seed for planting. Unskilled workers have carried out many of the remaining bodies and set up tents to serve as living spaces for the soldiers and townsfolk. Wagons and horses arrive every few days bringing goods from the Holy City. My troops are working without delay hauling corpses to blazing pillars of fire, but the stench is overwhelming and lingering. The newly promoted Commander Rama and his army are stationed here to protect against bandits, darklings, and wildlife encroaching on the city's borders. We are still waiting on news of Lord Theodrix's arrival. This concludes my report on the reconstruction of Paul Vale. Crisian Forenza. Why were we chosen to watch over the cripple? One attendant asked aloud. That's our job. Stop complaining, you are going to get us whipped. If Lady Lilith sees us slacking off, she will kill us both. The second said in a soft voice, Why is this guy so important? He looks like an ordinary soldier. Lifting a pile of linen intended for bandages, the first attendant followed the second toward the tent. He's supposedly the hero of Paul Vale, she answered. Lady Lilith's been spending all her time taking care of him. Then why isn't she here now? Why are we the ones stuck taking care of him? She was called away to her clan and Firenze meetings. Maybe one of us should speak up, don't you dare. We were ordered to be here by the Firenze clan, and I, for one, do not want to test their kindness. We have a good thing going here, don't fuck it up. A good thing? I'd rather be around those women on the other side of camp. Of course you would, but you know what I'd like more? Living. The two servants reached the assigned tent and returned to cleaning Rayleigh's immobile body. A slight hand reached through the tent flaps and spread them open. The scent of roses and lavender filled the tent. Lady Lilith! We weren't expecting you. Lilith looked around the tent studiously before slowly returning her gaze to the two servants. How is he? She asked in a concerned voice. Full of fear, the man looked to his toes. The second servant came up with a hop in her step. We have been taking diligent care of him, ma'am, she said devotedly. Relief and joy showed in Lilith's eyes at the rising and falling of Rayleigh's chest. Then she felt a surge of aggressive energy rushing in from all sides. The Caelestis elders were using their power to search the camp. When they located Lilith, they let her know they had arrived. Her skin felt cold and sweaty as the three elders' strength seized her like a pair of massive hands. She focused her own energy, pushing back and freeing herself. A servant entered. Lady Lilith, the envoy from the Caelestis has arrived. They are expecting you at the clan meeting with the Firenze, I understand. I can understand their impatience. Turning away from Rayleigh, she pushed out of the faintly lit tent and onto the muddy walkway. As immense droplets gave themselves over to gravity, the grayish-brown sky opened up and water crashed down onto the muddy ground. The saturated earth could not absorb any more, and small floods began washing away the blood and flesh, dissolving the evidence of the battle. Powerful winds shook the tents surrounding the city. Mechanical workers scurried through the dense rain at their tasks as the citizens took refuge in the broken-down buildings. Blood-stained roads began to clear and regain their shine. Clean marbled stone radiated with the ground's warmth, causing the pavement to sweat, becoming slick. Large trees that pinned bodies of priests against buildings were cut down, leaving stains from the entrails. The rain continued to power wash the city of Paul Vale, rinsing the town clean of a pungent stench of corpses. The dark creatures continued to scurry around the edges of the town hunting for unsuspecting townsfolk new to the area, pulling burning corpses away, and feasting on their cooked flesh. Lilith and her entourage were barraged with water droplets. They followed a path built to let the clan officials move around without dirtying their clothes too much. As she reached the end, she was surprised to find advisors standing around impatiently. Are you finished ignoring us? You have a lot of nerve, making us wait. The Caelestis guards sent by her family took a step forward with their hands on their hilts. How dare you speak to Our Lady in this manner? Lilith raised a hand, halting them. I apologize for making you wait. I have arrived now, so let us enter and start this meeting, she said with a faint smile. Inside, the fallout from the fight had left windows blown out and open to the rain. Several giant wood tables had been pushed together for the meeting. The wood is polished bright and smelled of citrus. A group of servants worked to set down the slab of wood. This arrogant bitch, a well-dressed man said, pointing toward the door. Silence. A booming voice broke in. If you carry on, I'll have you beaten to death. You can't touch us. We are the advisors to the Firenze. You don't have the authority, the man said, choking on his spit. Stepping forward, Theodrix revealed his face. I have all the authority I need. Sighing deeply, he took a seat at the head of the table. But if you still wish to challenge me, then these two hands I have will be more than enough to make you submit. Speaking up apprehensively, the advisor said, Who do you think you are, Theodrix? As he finished speaking, four travelers entered the room. Ignoring the words, Theodrix turned to the soaking guests. Do you know where Rayleigh is? Not yet. Word around camp is that he's being taken care of by one of the Caelestis brats. Seraph, can't you pull rank? After all, you're their leader. I was once, but I've all but abandoned my family and clan. I'm sure my face would only make things more difficult. Seraph took off his overcoat. Looking for a place to hang it, he finally draped the damp jacket over one of the chairs. You're just making excuses to avoid seeing your father. The twins Latte and Elka spoke at the same time with mocking voices, then looked toward Seraph. Shut up. That's only part of the reason. Seraph's tone revealed the effect the twins' teasing had on him. The last of the adventurers walked in, her sultry movements and allure drawing the attention of everyone but the three men who were conversing. I got a brief report of what happened, Oriel said. The advisor, now cowering in a corner from hearing the voice of Theodrix, pissed himself. Latte, Elka, Seraph, Oriel, you're making a scene! The four looked over at the advisor and his entourage and laughed. Yeah, right. Theodrix cracked a smile too. Even I can have a little fun sometimes. Where's the kid now? He asked sternly. Oriel turned to the Caelestis. He's in the care of Lilith Caelestis. She's very protective and not allowing anyone to see him. Theodrix's eyebrows perked up. Is she going to cause trouble for us? No. Since we genuinely care for his well-being, with a conversation or two, I think she'll let us see him. Theodrix, glaring to his right, released killing intent onto his family advisors. The raw power of his intentions overwhelmed the aides, making them step back in fear against the thick wooden walls. The small dining hall started to fill up as members of the Forenza family took their seats. Rama entered followed by his entourage. Promoted to commander, he had been put in charge of the rebuilding efforts. Sir? Reconstruction is ahead of schedule by 2 weeks. If we receive mechanical workers, I think we could have the city rebuilt in half the estimated time. Rama nodded to his new assistant, thanking him for his arduous work. Then he moved forward and politely greeted the former Forenza head, the tension in the room making him smile. It's been quite a while, my lord. Theodrix squinted, looking across the table. I recognize that voice. Rama, my friend, look at you, all grown up. Rama smiled and raised a hand in acknowledgement. With a light tone, he asked, My old teacher, what interests do you have here? Theodrix did not hesitate to answer. I'm looking into the young hero who fought off the giant invaders. He saved me some trouble, and I have an interest in his well-being. Did you know that Rayleigh was under my command? No. I haven't heard anything concrete, and information from the clan isn't as reliable as it once was. I find it hard to locate reliable sources these days. Rama turned to his doe-eyed assistant. Can we see about getting these windows boarded up? The assistant nodded and left, and Rama began giving a brief synopsis of the war and the events that had followed. Theodrix, now sitting down, gestured for a drink. The bastard was able to do all that. And you had my grandson under your command too? Yes. Walker is an officer in the Band of the Wolf, a mercenary army attached to my command. Why the hell is my grandson a mercenary? Apparently, he was forced out of the academy because politics won out. Politics? Theodrix took a drink from his cup, and his mood shifted once more. His anger and bloodlust could be felt throughout the camp. Where the hell is my son? I want to know why the family I'd built is crumbling in the face of corruption and incompetence. The tired officer did his best to calm the old lord. The current lord is on his way here. Representatives of the Cura and the church are also arriving soon. Theodrix sat back and took a sip of the honey wine handed to him by Seraph. Seraph, what are you thinking? Seraph looked Theodrix in the eye. I wouldn't plan too far. Suppose Rayleigh's awakened his power to this extent. What are your intentions? My intentions? In that case, they do not matter. We'll have to rely on Oriel and the young Caelestis girl. He leaned his head back into the chair. You're probably right, but I'm excited to see his growth. Hell, I remember when we found him. He was already a monster. Theodrix took a long breath. If he's grown even more, I don't want to lose precious resources and the relationship we've started to build to shitty decisions. Seraph answered his benefactor's words. Rayleigh is rational, maybe too much so. I have a strong feeling he will not care about the political fallout of his actions. His concern will be learning to control his power. An interesting thought. If you are right, I have an idea about where he can do that. Seraph bowed his head in acknowledgement, and returned to his companions. Other groups of people began entering the great hall to prepare for the meeting of clans. The stout doors swung freely, and the hardwood walls did little to stop voices from escaping into the lobby. Standing in the corner of the room, Lilith was encircled by her clan's leadership, worried frowns on their faces. One elder rubbed her dark hollowed eyes, and her two sisters copied the motion exactly. Cautiously observing Lilith's energy, the three old witches questioned her. Is it possible for us to recruit him into the family? We need to show that we can be of help to him. Lilith, what are his needs and wants? What is his personality like? Lilith paused, considering carefully how to reply to the witches. I don't want to get your hopes up, but my relationship with Rayleigh is just beginning. I have no interest in trying to recruit him to our clan. He's been through a lot and is going to need friends and stability. The three old ladies, understanding her intention to look into the future, showed little emotion. They turned around to face the room, long black hair flowing from their hoods. The golden crow's feet around their eyes allowed them to see events before they played out. Breathing in, all three became aware of the tension filling the hall. Then chatter from outside broke the uncomfortable silence. Rama looked toward the door to see a silhouette with broad shoulders. Tyreen entered with Lewis and Yoshi, who had finally found time to clean up. Each man, recently promoted, wore a new rank insignia on his shoulder. All three seemed out of place. Tyreen grabbed a chair on his way to the table. Setting it down next to Rama, he spoke out to his friend. Interesting atmosphere brewing in here. He reached for an empty goblet. It was better a few moments ago. Our young friend has persuasive support in the primary family. I wonder what will happen when he wakes up. Theodrix sat back quietly, listening, and observed the giant of a man as Rama poured honey wine into the goblet. The golden liquid sparkled in the candlelight. Rama handed the drink to his old subordinate. I don't know what's going to happen, but Lord Theodrix is not happy with the advisors. I'm sure that before the end of this meeting, there will be more bloodshed. Tyreen took a generous swig. This is good stuff. Sweet, with a hint of cherry and berries. I wonder who brought it. Theodrix leaned forward. You earned a gift for a job well done. My student here told me of your band's deeds, but I hear you are under judicial scrutiny. What happened? He vanished and reappeared like smoke beside Tyreen, filling up his goblet. Tyreen took a long look at Theodrix and thanked him. One of my men got carried away during the chaos and killed a messenger. Then the idiot ran off and performed a blood ritual. As a result, our rewards were stripped from us, and my men are under heavy watch. It wasn't Rayleigh, was it? Theodrix's laugh, and the fact that he knew Rayleigh's name, took Tyreen by surprise. I'll have your rewards reinstated later. But as for your man, he will have to atone. Tyreen set his goblet down. His actions are due to my lack of leadership. I will atone for my negligence. But I thank the elder for granting my men any form of rewards. Sure thing. You had to deal with my troublesome grandson. Theodrix walked back to his seat at the head of the table. The weather took a turn for the worse. The downpour grew stronger, and the flashes of lightning were followed by loud thunder announcing to the inhabitants of Paul Vale that the strikes were nearby. The tents shook aggressively, shaking the metal within. A loud and painful scream erupted from a tent. Ah! Rayleigh jolted up, his muscles aching and his cracked, brittle bones throbbing. He rolled out of bed, almost fell, and set his feet firmly on the ground. Noticing that his clothes had shrunk, he muttered, How long have I been out? He pushed his charcoal-colored hair back, letting his new crimson eyes adjust to the light. He licked his parched lips. I need some water. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He fell, and the wood beneath him cracked loudly. Two servants rushed into the tent. Young master, are you all right? Let us help you up. One man reached under Rayleigh's arms and used all his leg power to push him upright. Sorry for making trouble, Rayleigh said, regaining his balance. Young lord, it's no trouble. We are glad you are finally awake. Lady Lilith will be pleased to know. Looking over his shoulder, he nodded to a slight woman, who headed out of the tent. How long have I been out? 3 weeks, sir. What's happened? Paul Vale is under reconstruction. Your band and the Forenza forces led by Commander Rama are in charge. And a big meeting is going on. A meeting? The higher-ups are trying to figure out what to do with you. So, politics, huh? Figures. I don't even know what happened, and they're ready to shove me under the carpet. Shove you under the carpet? You are a hero. You fought off Hirion, the king of the giants. The servant said animatedly. I need a recount of what happened after I blacked out. Is anyone from my squad nearby? Wait here. I will get you some water and see if I can find you some food. Lady Lilith will explain everything to you. Rayleigh leaned up against the cot behind him and took a few big breaths. After several coughs, he sat back and let his mind settle. Why am I so thirsty? He asked himself. His throat felt like it was on fire. As he waited for his attendant to return, he scanned the tent for anything that might soothe his throat. He pushed himself up and tried to reach the tent's opening, but his body's weight was too much for his legs as he fell upon the hard floor once more. On hearing word of the commotion, the young servant returned and found Rayleigh still on the floor, fighting gravity. He lifted him up again. You're heavier than you look, sir. Rayleigh rubbed his throat and forced his dry, scarred throat muscles to activate. I need water. Please take me where I can get some. The servant nodded to his ragged charge and helped him back down to the fur-covered cot. He left fleetly, returning before Rayleigh knew he was gone, and handed him a goblet of ice water. Rayleigh forced his mouth open and let the cold liquid soothe his throat. The servant darted out of the tent once more, as chilly air blew in. In search for more water and any food he could scavenge, the servant walked systematically through the camp. Lying back down, Rayleigh covered himself with furs and closed his eyes to rest them, focusing on his surroundings and feeling the pain ease throughout his torso. Abruptly, excruciating pain filled his body. He hunched over, grabbing his sides, and screamed. Returning, the young servant barely stopped him from falling to the ground again. Bent over and catching his breath, Rayleigh felt his bones growing and his muscles hardening, making his body more defined. It began to alter, sculpting itself. His insides felt like they were on fire. He gave into the pain, closing his eyes as he lost consciousness. The servant set down the provisions he had gathered and raised the hero up. He grew nervous as the man remained limp. The flaps to the tent were still wide open, allowing passerby to snoop in, and a crowd started to grow as word spread that the local hero was awake. A woman's voice spoke from across the walkway. Oh my, this is troubling. The poor young man, let us get him back down into a comfortable position. He should not be up right now. We should close the tent flaps too before someone decides to make a name for themselves by killing Rayleigh. Theodrix is here, so I'm sure he's untouchable, but we shouldn't take any chances. Oriel smiled, lifting the servant's chin. Then reaching out and taking one of Rayleigh's shoulders, she helped him lay the hurt warrior down, check his bandages, and clean his body. Her sun-golden hair caught under the weight of Rayleigh's arm, tugging on her neck, and she freed it. Are you okay? She asked the servant. The young man looked confused. I'm fine. But it is bad enough that you are helping me do my job. You are speaking to me as an equal. The local nobles do not like that. Please just treat me like the servant that I am. If someone from the higher classes heard you, I could be punished. I refuse. If these rich idiots have a problem with how I treat people, they can go to hell. Sighing in fear, the man focused on holding Rayleigh up as Oriel finished wrapping fresh bandages around his torso. On the count of 3, she said, we are going to lift him up and lay him down on the cot gently. They braced themselves. 1, 2, 3. Using his legs and pushing up with his hips, the young servant managed to place Rayleigh on the tidy fur-covered cot. Servant, what is your name? It is Gusto, my lady. Well, thank you, Gusto. I can take it from here. Oriel reached into a soft leather pouch and handed him a silver coin. Run along, she said, gestured her hand. Gusto headed out to retrieve the water and food he had ordered for Rayleigh. Tightening the flaps on the tent behind him, Oriel made sure that no light could enter. Then she slowly undressed, allowing the chilly air to encase her slight body, and climbed under the fur next to Rayleigh, cuddling up to the unconscious man. A lone candle continued to burn as she closed her eyes and placing her head on his chest. She listened to his heartbeat. The comfortable rhythm allowed her to relax and rest. A cold wind blew over the camp, bringing a trace of sulfur to Rayleigh's nostrils. He shook in fear as scaly hands reached out of the darkness for him. Unable to move, he tried to fight off the energy flowing into him. Bright golden eyes pierced his soul. It felt as if some creature was judging him, weighing him. The eyes grew brighter, releasing a penetrating warmth. Rayleigh felt like his consciousness had been stripped down and laid bare. His muscles began twitching wildly. In a cold sweat, Rayleigh woke and jerked up, grimacing. Looking down, confused, he found Oriel lying undisturbed. The pain in his body lessened, and he laid his head back down. He stared up into the darkness of the tent, unable to fall back to sleep. Chapter 11. Unexpected changes. Sunlight peeked through the opening of the tent, striking a metal pot, and reflecting into Rayleigh's eyes. They fluttered slowly open, and he stretched his arms out, popping his joints. A smile of relief came over him. His arms felt heavy, so he dropped them. They fell softly upon the body of a sleeping woman. Oriel lay clutched close to Rayleigh's body, her bright golden hair spread out across his chest. As he tried to find room to stretch his legs, he did his best not to disturb her. He gently moved his hand out from under her body to get out of the bed. As he did, the bed jerked, and he felt something take a cold grip on his genitals. He froze in place. Oriel, fully awake, had a firm hold on him. "Where do you think you're going, after touching my body and getting me in the mood? Are you just going to settle for foreplay?" Rayleigh, shocked, looked down at her. "I needed to stretch my legs." "A likely story," she said, releasing her grip and letting Rayleigh settle to his feet. After finding some clothes, he pushed out through the tent flaps. The heat of the sun roasted his face. Smiling and greeting the workers, he headed for the closest gate, trying not to draw attention. As he made his way through the camp, he sped up, until at a dead sprint, he leaped over a barricade and ran into the forest. A cool breeze brushed his face and hair as he ran, stopping at a cliff's edge, overlooking the sea, and breathed in the salty air. Not recognizing the place, he turned around to get his bearings. The coast was 15 miles from the town, and he had reached it in a matter of minutes. Turning back, he looked out across the ocean as he caught his breath. His muscles ached, and they twitched as his hands rubbed his legs and arms. He could feel the changes in his muscle density, but his body felt light. His mind started racing, trying to figure out why. He jumped up and down near the edge, higher and then higher again, testing his physical limits. After a few jumps he came down with too much force, and the soft earth crumbled. He plunged 500 feet before he hit his head. His anger at the pain allowed him to focus on tensing his stomach up. He whipped himself around and kicked off the cliff face with all his strength. He fell another 500 feet, hoping the rough sea would break his fall, but he crashed into the rocks, shattering a boulder, and almost losing consciousness before bouncing into the raging waters. The cold warmth of the sea enveloped his body as he started to sink toward the bottom. When he opened his eyes, the salty water burned them with a fiery intensity. Steadying himself in the water, he tried to find his bearings. To his surprise, he found that he was not panicking for air. His breathing was normal, his lungs shrinking just enough to release oxygen. Finding the sun, he swam upward, broke the surface, and breathed gently as the waves knocked him back and forth but were unable to drag him back down. He turned around, locating the rock face, and then pushed through the waves. When he reached the broken boulders, he had a tough time gripping the slick surface. Finally pulling himself up, Rayleigh laid belly up on the rock and stared up at the engulfing gray sky. A loud growl erupted from his belly. "Shit, I'm hungry. I should find something to eat and head back to camp." Sitting up, Rayleigh heard splashing. He turned his head to see a school of monstrously large fish swimming against the tide, jumping and diving in the water. As they approached, several got stuck on the rocks. Rayleigh made his way over to them, carefully keeping his balance. He grabbed two and kicked the others back into the water. Then he looked up, wondering how he would get back to the top. He squatted down, focused his power on his hamstrings, and exploded upward, jumping from the rocks to the top of the cliff in one bound. He was still holding the fish, though their slippery bodies were dragging on the ground. Rayleigh used his newfound speed to dash the 15 miles back to the town. As he entered the camp, guards rushed around, and the maid's frantic orders could be heard. "Lock the gates! Wolves are drawing close!" He felt heavy, warm breath on the top of his head. A 13-foot wolf, soldiers at arms, prepared to push the wolf back. "Hunter, drop the fish and slowly make your way forward." Rayleigh did not budge. Looking back at the soldiers, he muttered, "I'm not giving up my dinner." His stomach growling louder, Rayleigh stared the starving animal in the eyes. The beast took this as a challenge and bared its teeth. Irritated and hungry, Rayleigh dropped one of the fish. Before it hit the ground, he jumped up, grabbed the hair under the wolf's chin, and pulled it down to him. The wolf showed no signs of retreating as the soldiers advanced. "Don't move," Rayleigh said. He offered the second fish to the wolf as a peace gesture. Hearing howls from the woods, the wolf bowed its head, accepting the fish in its mouth, and left the ruined city gates for its pack. Picking up the other colossal fish, Rayleigh made his way back to his tent, looking forward to roasting it. When he arrived, he found two monumental figures sitting at the fire. "Little brother! I've been looking for you," one said, squinting his eyes. Seeing the familiar square jawline, Rayleigh exclaimed, "Heimeyer? Is that you?" Heimeyer threw an affectionate punch at Rayleigh's chest. "Theodric's been asking about you, little brother. Oriel was scolded for letting you leave this morning. I needed to stretch my legs. Your body's changed. Its structure is more like a giant's now." "That doesn't make any sense," Rayleigh said, puzzled. He sat down and, struggling to find the words, described his experience. "I fell off a cliff while testing some of the changes. You know, jumping ability, stuff like that." Berlin stopped stoking the fire and looked up. "What cliff?" "The closest one is 15 miles away." "You made it there, fell off a cliff, climbed back up, and made it back here for supper?" "Yeah. Except I did not climb up the cliff. I grabbed 2 fish and jumped back up to the top." Heimeyer spit out a mouthful of liquor, feeding the fire. "You did what?" Berlin laughed. "Let me have that fish. I'll clean it and get it on the spike." Taking the sea bass, he shook his head. "This must weigh 200 pounds. Heimeyer leaned over to Berlin. "What he says, doesn't it sound a little crazy?" "No crazier than a foot soldier using fire and undead magic. Or fighting a giant head-on and matching its strength." Reaching into his bag, he pulled out some honey. "It would be good if I had some seasonings for this fish," Rayleigh, hearing footsteps, said. "I'll try to find something on my way back." "You are going somewhere?" "Yeah, I hear footsteps. They're probably coming to fetch me for the old man." Heimeyer leaned his giant body back. "I'll go with you. It would be good to let the old man know that I'm in camp too." A group of men arrived. "Lord Heimeyer? We did not know you were here. We were just expecting Rayleigh. I thought I'd visit my little brother, and then head over to see Lord Theodric's." "I see. Then you will be coming with us." Rayleigh, standing, towered over the newcomers. "Let's see the old man and find something to season this fish with. Maybe we can find some beer or wine. Let's keep our eyes open." As they walked through the tents, they saw a group of warriors in unfamiliar armor sitting with some hooded individuals. The hooded ones watched the built soldier making his way through cheers and celebration. Rayleigh turned his head away from the ovation. "These guys like you, little brother." "Nah, I'm just a flavor of the month. Tomorrow, I'll be ignored." "I don't know. The witches say you are going to bring a storm. This may be the start." Heimeyer's smile showed his excitement about future battles. Rayleigh gave Heimeyer a puzzled look. "You were in the north?" "Yeah, had to deal with some family matters. When I heard about what went down here, I consulted with them. I guess we'll see in time." In the town square, they entered the hotel, and continued into the banquet hall, dripping wet now from the rain. Heimeyer shook himself in the entryway like a wet dog. Drawing glares from all around, he smiled. Smells of spiced fruit, meat, and pastries filled their nostrils. "Lord Heimeyer and Rayleigh have arrived." The announcement echoed across the room. Theodric stood up. "Where have you been? You've had me waiting all day." Noticing Oriel, Rayleigh walked over and put a hand gently on her lower back. "Sorry about getting you in trouble." Turning around, she looked up and kissed him on the cheek, silencing everyone. Lilith looked on with Lewis and Yoshi from across the room. "You've changed again. I can sense your physical presence now." I don't mind taking the blame for you, but tell me where you're going next time. Rayleigh placed his hand on her head. You got it. No more running off on my own. Theodrix grabbed 2 silver goblets from the table and carried them to the casks. Filling them with thick golden liquid, he brought them to the new arrivals. Heimeyer pushed his long blonde hair back, uncovering his sea-blue eyes, as he raised the cup to his lips and gulped down the sweet, fragrant mead. Rayleigh followed his friend's lead. I didn't expect to see you here, Heimeyer. I just arrived. Your business in the north, is it concluded? No. I may need assistance. But for now, I want to give my attention to my little brother. I think eventually, investing my energy in training him will be a significant help. Rayleigh refilled their cups and returned. I'll help in any way I can, he told Heimeyer. But I have to get my abilities under control. If I do not, I'll just be a liability. Other than the physical changes, what else has happened? Theodrix asked, looking Rayleigh over. A fire in my belly fills my body with a calm heat. This fire flows through my blood vessels every so often and augments my strength. But it is docile now. I don't know how to access it to see what it is. Theodrix rubbed his chin. What you're describing is familiar to me. Get me a parchment. Taking a sheet of parchment and a pen from a nervous servant, he wrote down a message. Seraph, we need to find Shin. I hear he is teaching at one of the war colleges in the Elephant Lands, or on the isolated Emperor's Peninsula. It is hard to know for sure. He moves around with the seasons. Rayleigh drained his cup. There are eastern-looking warriors in the courtyard. They looked like Imperial soldiers. Why not ask them? Seraph headed to the door. Show me, all right. Rayleigh followed him. Out there and down a way, just beyond the tents. Their camp to the left. Let's go. Leaving the hall, they found their way to the camp of the Eastern warriors. Hello there. Do you mind if we intrude? The warriors scrambled for their weapons, but one of the hooded figures at the fire raised a hand, and they calmed themselves. What business does the hero of the city have with us? You know me? Rayleigh asked, surprised. It is our business to know you. We track anomalies and send back information about them. You are of interest to us. Who cares about me so much that they sent you here? Our Emperor. He is looking for others like him, and we are looking into your actions here. So, you're saying I'm similar to your Emperor? Yes. In ways you are? That's remarkably interesting. I mean, knowing that there are others like me. Seraph intruded with a request. Can you find our friend Shin? Oh wait, he's using another name. You are looking for Lindrang, right? We can bring him here. Seraph reached into his coin bag. We can pay you for the trouble, the soft voice replied. Keep your money. I think doing a favor for this one might bring its own rewards in the future. The cloaked inquisitor lowered her tattooed hand that had been pointing at Rayleigh and drew the sword at her waist. Then she swung her arm down, creating a dimensional door. A blurry vision formed, like a green portrait just big enough to enter, then suddenly stabilized and became clear enough to see into. A sweet, humid breeze wafted out. Standing right beside the opening, Rayleigh smelled the faint fragrance of toasting bread, chicken, and boiling fruit. The Inquisitor ordered her second to enter the portal and summon Lin Drang to Paul Vale. Intruder! Intruder! Workers screamed. Guards appeared around the school, their spears out. The cloaked Imperial soldiers slipped by them and entered a courtyard. Orange trees and lavender lined the ivory floor leading to a class where Shin Lin Drang stood lecturing. It appears we have guests, he said, looking past his students. You stink of sulfur and sea breeze. What does an Inquisitor of the Dragon Emperor want from me? Finally catching up, the guards raised their blades to his neck. No, it's okay. He just wishes to speak with me? A red-skinned, bearded guard with sharp eyes spoke up. Master Lin, how can you be sure? I can read his intentions. Look around. If this warrior wanted to do us harm, he could have set fire to everything. He can do whatever he wants and be 1,000 miles away in an instant. The soldier looked flustered. He could set this school ablaze? Looking back sharply at the cloaked messenger, he said. We will stay, watch, and verify. Lin smiled faintly. As you wish. So, what brings you here, stranger? Am I being summoned back to the peninsula? No. I'm not on imperial business, more out of curiosity. An old friend of yours wishes to meet with you. I have opened a breach if you wish to visit him. We can go now and return at any time. Lin eyed the Inquisitor suspiciously. Let me finish up this class. As you wish, Master Lin. How can you trust this man? I understand that you are powerful, but this could be a trap, or an assassination attempt. You know how many enemies you have. Whatever happens, happens. If I am meant to meet my end, then I will accept it. Still, I sense no bloodlust or lies, which means he is most likely to be speaking the truth. Turning to the Inquisitor, he added, Please forgive Abbas. He is a good friend and is quite protective, you see. Abbas installed himself in the corner of the room, never taking his eyes off the slight, cloaked temporal magic user. It is fine. We Imperial Inquisitors are used to this level of animosity. Lin returned to his students. The white marble room showed that the school was prestigious and well-funded. The best of the best are trained within its halls. Intense bursts of energy could be felt in the air, an aura of death and coldness. Soldiers and mages specializing in containment appeared racing down the passages. The Inquisitor kept one eye on Lin and another on the corridor, but Lin's calm put them at ease. However, Abbas, his chest puffed out, had a massive smile on his face. Is that guard laughing at me? Who wouldn't be worried if they felt such an enormous, ominous emotion? I wonder if this is what the Lestragonians felt when facing off against the hero. More guards rushed down the hall. Each step they took appeared heavier and slower than the last. Is time slowing down? The Inquisitor wondered. Sharp, dark brown eyes peered out from the shadows. The Inquisitor matched the cold stare and remarked, You shouldn't stare so vehemently. You will make a bad impression. A harsh, cold wind wrapped itself around him. As its grip tightened, the Inquisitor closed his eyes and sensed the energy around him. A sweetness fell upon his lips. Every movement ached, and the weight of power pressed down on his bones. Expelling a single breath, he dispelled the force. I was trying to be polite, since I'm in a foreign land, but if you continue with your actions, I will defend myself. What an interesting little man. A voice echoed through the dissipating energy. Guards continued to rush through the halls frantically. Two stopped at the doorway to the room, and a gruff voice meekly asked, Master Lin, have you seen Shiva? We cannot find our young goddess. Lin stopped mid-sentence. Amruta is out of her room. Yes, Master Lin. Nothing you can do about it then. She will show herself when she chooses to. She's too irresponsible, Master Lin. What if she kills again? I cannot stop her. Can you? Just leave her be for now. If you push her too hard, or corner her, you make things worse. But Master, she can't be allowed to roam the halls. Leave it be. Lin laced his voice with inner energy, forcing the panicking guards to their knees. Your job is to protect this school and keep order. If you are running around confused and scared, what type of message do you send to the students? His eyes showed compassion even as his words lashed out at the guards. Closing his eyes, he paused for a long moment. Then he smiled and opened them. I found her, Captain. She is in the courtyard. I recommend again that you leave her alone, but the choice is yours. He signaled to Abbas to check on his apprentice, and the guard was gone before the Inquisitor's eyes could register his movements. The Inquisitor took a moment to process what had just happened. This place is full of monsters too. I should report this experience as soon as I get back. The room calmed as Lin returned to his lectures, his students listening attentively. Today, we are going to practice absorbing the natural energy around us. You can use this energy to bolster your strength and give yourself the ability to wield the elements. Some of you will develop talents in one of the 4 elements. The most talented among you will be able to manipulate 3 elements. One of the students raised her hand. What about Lady Amruta? Amruta, as most of you know, distorts the natural flow of energy with her overbearing affinity for demonic and ice energy. She pulls energy from the veil and bends it to her will. She can also control ice and wind. You should understand that Amruta and those like her are abnormal, and you should not judge yourself by their talent. The Inquisitor listened along with the students as Lin continued his lecture. Chapter 12. Stress of Teaching. Birds sang a song of spring and drank from fountains of nectar as they danced and bathed in the sunlight. The dimensional breach stayed open, shimmering like a mirage in the surface of a pool. Guards were posted on both sides, making no contact with each other. "Let us go," Lin said, leaving the courtyard. The cloaked figure followed him into the breach. As they emerged, the opening sealed itself closed, and they were welcomed by the damp evening air. "Damn this cold," Lin said. Taking a deep breath, he sensed rich energy in the humid surroundings. Theodrix and his plots, he thought to himself. Allowing his senses to spread through the town, he located his friend and walked off in his direction. Seraph, seeing him, called out to the middle-aged man. "Lin Drang!" His voice had a commanding ring. "You're the one, right?" Evidence points to these inquisitors keeping their word. Lin focused on Rayleigh instead. "Theodrix has a request for me. And as for this one, Imperial Dragon Inquisitors do not lie. They are incapable of such a thing." Lin turned his back to Seraph and continued to follow his senses. "What do you mean?" The Inquisitor who had brought Lin answered for Seraph. "If we lie, the dragon's fire that dwells in us will burn our souls and body to ash. It is the price we pay for serving the Dragon of the Sun." "What the hell do you mean, dragon fire?" Rayleigh asked. Ignoring the comment, the Inquisitor returned to his seat on the dead tree, next to the slight figure who gave him his orders. Lin followed Seraph and Rayleigh into the hall. Breaking the loud chatter, Theodric's voice boomed across the space. "Lin Drang! Welcome, my friend. I have been waiting for you." He turned to Seraph. "How did you find him so fast?" Seraph's keen eyes did not budge from Lin. His cool and calm demeanor bothered Seraph. "We had help from Dragon Imperial Inquisitors. They must have known where he was the whole time." Good, good. "Lin, come here." Theodrix, now tipsy and relaxed, gestured to his friend. "I need a huge favor. I have a ward that I want you to evaluate, and if possible, help." Lin looked at Theodrix doubtfully. "Help? Does he have a cultivation base?" "The odds of finding a cultivator in the West are rare, almost zero. I think he may have learned to access your ways naturally, but he's having difficulty with control." "Control problems? That could be disastrous. I will evaluate him, but I am still under contract with the Ivory Academy. I'll be available in a few months." Theodrix nodded at his friend's words. "That should be fine. I'll have Seraph and Heimeyer beat the basics of our fighting ways into him." "Beat the basics? Didn't he attend your family's war college?" "He did. But those lazy instructors only make cannon fodder. A change is needed to bring the academy up to standard." "You filthy devil's whore!" a cardinal shouted. "Why am I seated next to this Calestis bitch?" Lilith sat calmly, exercising restraint. The cardinal's words started to slur, and he grew short of breath. The pretentious holy man grabbed his throat as Rayleigh entered the meeting hall followed by several others. The air in the room became heavy again, and loud banging on the walls added to the tension as the broken windows were boarded up. Filling the room with bloodlust, Rayleigh appeared in the doorway. "You ungrateful shit." Letting his anger get the best of him, Rayleigh grabbed the cardinal by the collar and lifted him off the ground. "The woman you insulted was a huge contributor to the battle. And she nursed me back to health even though we barely know each other." Lilith, looking worried, spoke up. "Rayleigh, please stop. Don't harm him. It will only cause us problems, and we don't need any more." The young woman gestured for him to come to her. Dropping the cardinal, Rayleigh moved closer. Lilith reached out and touched his face. "You're okay." Her cheeks flushed as she felt the heat of his raw emotions. "Little brother, calm down." Heimeyer spoke with an instigative tone. Rayleigh, tasting the cardinal's fear, stared through the priest. Theodrix's laughter bellowed across the room. "Rayleigh, stop playing with the idiot priest and go thank the Inquisitor that brought Lin here." Removing his hand from the man's neck, Rayleigh took Lilith's hand as a guide, moving closer to her. "If this man is going to insult a friend of mine, why shouldn't I enjoy myself? Besides, his fear is intoxicating." Still laughing, Theodrix pointed to the door. "Go eat and rest. And no more running off without Seraph or Heimeyer." "You got it." Rayleigh left the hall for his tent, where Berlin and roast fish awaited him. "Hold up, Seraph and I are going back with you." Heimeyer and Sarah followed like a pair of big brothers, knowing that their sibling was attracted to trouble. Rayleigh nodded in acknowledgement. Okay, but I'm going to stop by to see those Eastern warriors again. Sarah looked puzzled. Why? I thought I saw one of them with powdered miso. Berlin would kill me if I didn't bring back some seasoning. Hey, little brother, let's raid the old man's liquor too. Rayleigh and Heimeyer laughed sportively. Ha, let's do it. We'll grab what we can carry. Sarah shook his head, smiling. You two are idiots. That may be, Sarah, but you're thirsty too, I bet. Licking his parched lips, he nodded. Yeah, I could use a drink. As they approached the Imperial soldiers, a starchiness in the air caused Rayleigh to perk up. His keen senses led him to a soldier steaming a pot of rice. Wondering if he could barter for it, he walked over and tried to initiate a conversation. Speaking in the common tongue, he started with, Hello? I came to say thanks. The Inquisitor, staring at the fire, looked up. It was more for our benefit than for yours. I'm curious to see what happens with you, and how you respond to future conflicts. Rayleigh's piercing crimson eyes shone brightly in the evening's darkness. I wanted to thank you for doing this favor for us. The old man is happy you brought his friend. The Inquisitor's cloak opened up and a pair of plum-colored lips asked a question. You never met Master Lin before? No. I was found long after he parted ways with Theodrix. Theodrix is indeed competent if he was able to see that Master Lin could help you. Rubbing her little hands together, the group's leader seemed to be enjoying the exchange. The old man is crazy strong. Still, he prefers to play a long game rather than relying on force. I see, so with him it is never what you see. Rayleigh shrugged. In some ways yes, but in others, no. You've found an interesting enough way to pay back the favor. Not realizing he owed a favor, Rayleigh waved his hand and headed over to the soldier cooking rice. The man looked up. You're the one that came in with that giant fish, right? Yeah. Trade? I'll share it for some of that rice and miso powder if you have some. You know how to use it? Yeah. I have some honey already. If I mix them, something good will come out of it. The soldier licked his chops. Okay. I'll do it. He handed the miso over. Your tent is the one in the back, right? I'll bring the rice over when it's done. Deal. See you then. They shook hands, and Rayleigh waved to the Inquisitor and headed back to his tent. Berlin sat by himself, still preparing the fish. He had already set up a large spit and stoked the fire. Yo, I'm back. I brought you some miso for the fish. Miso? Is that a seasoning? Yeah. Mix it with the honey and baste the fish with it. Okay, good to know. I found some root vegetables. I have them boiling right now. Singing approached from the darkness. I have ale, delicious mead. Give me a woman, and she'll get what she needs. Sounds like Heimeyer got the drinks. Little brother, I found 4 barrels of delicious alcohol. Tonight, we drink, and tomorrow we train. The singing and chatter drew a crowd to Rayleigh and Lilith's tent at the back of the camp. The heavy coldness of the air lessened as aromas from the fire saturated the area. Bodies huddled together for warmth, and casks of mead were cracked open. But the merrymaking and laughter did little to distract Berlin from cooking the 200-pound fish. Tossing in some hickory chips he had purchased from the loggers, Berlin added wood to the fire and fanned the flames. Lilith and Oriel returned together. An awkward, competitive silence stood like a wall between them, but the sweet scent of roasting honey drew both headstrong women. Sitting in the middle, clouded in shadows, and drinking a horn of mead, Rayleigh smiled and laughed. To his right, Heimeyer sang out a drunken beer song as he waited for food. On the other side, Sarif had tied his hair back and allowed a smile to break his stoic face. He joined into the half-giant's song, letting himself relax and celebrate for the night. Berlin remained somberly focused on the food even while pouring mead down his throat. You boys are having a hell of a time. We heard you all the way here. Oriel said as the 2 beauties entered the light of the fire. Oriel! Come sit here and drink. Heimeyer made a gesture and continued singing. Lilith made her way to Rayleigh. Refilling his horn in the barrel next to him, he extended it to her. Thank you. She drifted closer and kissed him on the cheek. And thank you for coming to my defense back in the dining hall. Drunk off his ass, Rayleigh leaned over and kissed Lilith back. A display of chivalry is the least I could do. Plus, those church types give me a bad vibe. Heimeyer leaned over to Oriel. It looks like you have competition. Whoever said a man needs only one woman? Great men have at least two, she countered. Heimeyer grew red in the face at Oriel's teasing. He looked over at Rayleigh and then threw his empty cup at him. Without breaking contact with Lilith's eyes, Rayleigh caught it. Rising to his feet, he walked over to the cask, refilled the cup, and brought it back to Heimeyer. He looked his blood brother in the eyes and threw the mead in his face. Heimeyer cocked his right hand and smashed it into Rayleigh's face. Rayleigh did not budge. Blood spurted from his nose as Heimeyer's eyes burned with envy. Here they go. Oriel picked up the cup and sat down next to Lilith. This should be interesting. Heimeyer threw another punch, which Rayleigh caught and used to throw him over his shoulder and onto the hard ground. Heimeyer's bounced close to the cooking fish, and Berlin, drunk and protective of the meal he was preparing, stopped him with a foot. Take your roughhousing elsewhere. If you ruin the food, I swear I'll pound you both into the ground myself. Ignoring him, Rayleigh and Heimeyer continued to exchange fists. Rayleigh's nimble movement allowed him to dodge his brother's slower, heavier blows, but when Heimeyer's fists connected they exploded, crackling in the air like burning firewood. Those two are monsters. Why are they fighting? Campgoers whispered. Because of the attention Rayleigh is getting from those two women. Overhearing the chatter, Oriel spoke up with irritation. You don't know what's going on. Heimeyer isn't jealous of Rayleigh. What do you mean? Lilith took the cup from her lips. Heimeyer and Rayleigh aren't just blood brothers. They're bound by fate. Oriel took a sip of mead. They're just testing each other? Not exactly. Think of it as wild animals sharpening their fangs. Just a brotherly spat, probably more out of boredom than anything. Bored? I thought they were enjoying themselves. And this looks serious to me. Look at Sarif. If this were a serious fight, he wouldn't be drinking and spreading that smile. What's the racket? Oh, a brawl. Yoshi approached from the center of the camp and stopped to watch. How interesting. Berlin, I'm gone for a minute, and you start a fun party without me. Berlin gave him a tipsy but direct look. Yoshi! You are back. Look, Rayleigh is up and healthy. We were just celebrating the band's accomplishments. Rayleigh slipped, allowing his brother to throw his weight in and toss the drunken brawler over the fire. Landing on his back, Rayleigh tumbled into the windy field behind his tent. As he bounced over the frost-laced ground, laughter sounded throughout the crowd. Is Rayleigh laughing after getting tossed like that? Heimeyer leapt directly onto his brother. He's trying to kill him, Lilith said. Sarif put down his cup. No, he's trying to enrage him. Heimeyer is testing Rayleigh's self-control. I thought Heimeyer said training would start tomorrow. Lilith's eyes remained glued to Rayleigh and Heimeyer. True, but he's not really training Rayleigh. He's pushing him. This looks like more than a test. It looks like a brutal beating. Kicking Heimeyer off his body, Rayleigh launched the giant man into the air and leapt to his feet, punching Heimeyer in the throat and knocking him to the ground. Not bad, little brother. What they are saying about you is true. Still, it is not enough to convince me that you fought a Lestragonian shaman king. I'm a bit disappointed. Heimeyer dug deep down and erupted with a roar, activating his berserker rage. His power, speed, and precision increased. He smashed Rayleigh back into the ground with incredible speed, creating a crater in the frozen ground. As Rayleigh's head hit the ground, he blacked out and his body went into autopilot. He let out a roar, shaking the earth and creating a dust cloud that blocked Heimeyer's view. The young warrior's hand burst from the cloud, grabbing Heimeyer by the face and lifting him from the ground as he jumped, carrying his brother up into the air and launching both across the camp and into the forest. Rayleigh threw his brother into the trees. Heimeyer rolled past enormous trees, setting them to swaying. Leaping after him, Rayleigh began pounding Heimeyer ruthlessly into the cold, muddy ground. Having had enough of the situation, Heimeyer twisted under his brother, flipping him, and pinning Rayleigh to the ground with a giant palm. His face was bloody and one eye swollen, and he spit out blood as he called back, laughing. Aye, Sarif! You see this? You say Rayleigh beat Hirian using berserker rage? Coming out of the shadows, Sarif approached Rayleigh, who was fighting to get Heimeyer to release him. Manipulating energy within himself and releasing it, Seraph used a finger to inject demonic power into Rayleigh's body, suppressing the overwhelming bloodlust. You can release the pressure you're putting on him. He should regain consciousness soon. He shook his head. He needs to learn control. Once he does, he will be an even greater threat than you, Heimeyer. I know. It was foreseen some time ago when I was home in the north. Let's head back. Yeah. Up you go, little brother. Tonight we drink. Heimeyer lifted Rayleigh from the ground and tossed him over a shoulder. They were singing when they reached the camp again. What happened to Rayleigh? He'll be fine, Oriel. We just needed to see his berserker rage. You don't think you went overboard, pulling it out of him like that? We're supposed to be celebrating. It's fine. Put me down, Rayleigh said groggily. Heimeyer set Rayleigh on the ground. The wounds on both men were visibly healing in the firelight, and more chatter rose. What kind of monsters are they? They can heal from injuries that quick? It's part of being a berserker. My people are frontline warriors for the giant god. Seraph sat back. Amir's not born into this world yet. Don't mind Seraph, my friends. His short temper is tested with an empty cup. Get this man some mead and let us sing, eat and drink. Heimeyer said with chaff words. Sometimes your simplistic attitude is the right one for the mood. Seraph responded, poking back. Shut up and drink, little brother. Fill your cup and let me tell you stories of my adventures. Rayleigh picked up a cup from the ground, dusted it off, and dipped it into the keg before walking over. His brother smiled and laughed, and a sudden fury overcame Rayleigh as he approached. I've had enough of your ideas for tonight. He knocked his brother out with a fist, returned to where Oriel and Lilith were sitting, and plopped down between them and leaned back. Seraph laughed and continued to drink as the fish finished roasting. The sweet and salty smell of honey, hickory, and miso circulated the camp. Well, it looks like we missed some entertainment. A man appeared carrying a pot of rice, speaking in broken English. Rayleigh leaned forward and gestured the man to join them. Berlin, noticing the rice, redirected the man to himself. You can set that down here. The fish is almost done. It sounds like you guys have been enjoying yourselves. Theodrix walked up to the tents with Lin Drang. Looking around, he paused on finding Heimeyer unconscious on the ground. Seraph stood and welcomed the family leader. Heimeyer couldn't wait to test Rayleigh. His attempt just reached its conclusion. Rayleigh defeated Heimeyer in a fight? In a fight? No. But he got the last hit in. And the last laugh. Seraph broke character and gave a chuckle. Then sitting back down, he took another drink. How is Rayleigh doing? Lowering the cup, Seraph said. I don't really know. He is acting the way he usually does around Heimeyer. I'll monitor him and watch for signs of mental degradation. I see. What do you make of that, Lin? I don't have an opinion yet. If he has somehow managed a form of cultivation, knowing how to respond to stress is an important part of that. But at this time, I don't think it matters too much. Seraph looked to the Eastern Master. Why is that? He just woke up from a brutal fight in which he lost control and rampaged across the battlefield, right? Personally, I believe he's still coming to grip with what happened. He's still recovering. Lin? I believe so, Theodrix. But we will have to wait and see how he does. Well, I'm betting that he's mentally tough and will work through this. The future of my family depends on it. You foresee problems with the Nosferatu? Not just the blood clans, but the Pantheon too. Oh, problems with the god's old friend. That is the same problem you had before, once upon a time. But when Rayleigh's secret is exposed, it will change the dynamic of power in the world. You're overhyping him a bit, don't you think? Not at all. My group and I were there at his awakening. His connection to the veil is the strongest I have ever seen. He is something rare and special in this world. Well, I'll see for myself if I decide to train him. Theodrix looked to Tyrene. Don't worry, Tyrene. My friend here has an eye for talent. If Rayleigh does not have potential, that's just the way it is. Tyrene's blank expression turned to a frown. You're unsure about the rookie? Why would you go to all this trouble for one man when you refuse to lift a finger to help your own flesh and blood? His new general's harsh words hit Theodrix. He frowned. Other than my grandsons, my offspring have not amounted to much. I have thought long and hard about how best to spend what political capital and resources I still have. Rayleigh was a blessing when I found him on the lost continent. Latte, Heimeyer, Oriel, Elka, and I were surrounded by veil-corrupted radiation beasts. Tyreen stepped forward, looking for a place to sit down. You were on the lost continent? The western lands aren't truly lost. They were just abandoned. There are still thriving cities, those that have adapted to the harsh environment around them. Lynn perked up at the information. You found Rayleigh on the expedition I didn't go on? Yes, in an old military installation on the coast. He was locked in a stasis tank. He was the last one there. The other 6 tanks were already empty.